evening. Welcome to the school board meeting for Livonia Public Schools Board of Education, Committee of the Whole meeting on June 15th, 2015. The first item on our agenda this evening is audience communications. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the board this evening? Seeing none, we will go on. Just as an informative note to the public, this is a committee of the whole meeting, and this is the type of meeting where we discuss issues at length. We will do a lot of question and answer, perhaps directing the superintendent or administration to get more information to the board, but this is not a voting meeting. You will not, don't expect to see any votes tonight. Those items that are ready to go for a vote will be sent up to the to our next agenda for a vote next week, but this is a discussion type of a meeting as opposed to voting. The next item on our agenda is Committee of the Whole, item 2. Dr. Liepa, we are looking at setting a date for the organizational meeting and reviewing the calendar. Would you like to address this for us?
Yes, you have in your packet a draft calendar for board meetings for the next school year. As you know, you're required to actually approve the regular meetings for the following year, and so we always bring that as an agenda item at an upcoming voting meeting. But as a practical matter, we also share with you our plans for the Committee of the Whole meetings and our study sessions. And so what we tried to do in drafting this for you is put together a very similar schedule that we have used in past years, where we have a Committee of the Whole meeting, a regular meeting, and then following that up with a study session, and then starting the process again the following month. As you know, some months are a little bit busier than others. For example, June, when we have several meetings and we have multiple Committee of the Whole and regular meetings. We also tried to factor in all of the dates as it relates to the holidays and how they all fall. So we did have a chance to put this in your packet in previous, a couple of weeks ago for you to take a look at. But by and large, the basic message with this is that this is the basic type of schedule that we have utilized in the past. And what you need to approve are the regular meeting dates, which we'd be happy to put in the appropriate format and bring back to you. I can't remember if we have to bring it back next meeting or if we bring it back to you in the organizational meeting in July. One of those two meetings it'll be back on the agenda. And other than that, it just gives you a flavor for the dates. And as you all know, especially outside of the regular meetings, we can always change the dates. So if something comes up, you need to have an extra meeting, we can always call a special meeting, and we do. If a Committee of the Whole meeting we're looking at and we don't have any agenda items, we can always cancel it. Those things can be done at a whim. The regular meetings, if you want to change, you actually have to vote at a meeting to change the regular meeting schedule. And we've done that in the past when we've needed to also. So it's a very flexible schedule and based on our typical past practice.
Are there any questions or comments on the schedule? Everyone's had a chance to take a look at it, and it doesn't look like it has any conflicts with major issues. For the benefit of the public also, there are 2 months in October and March when this board, as of the last couple of years, has added board workshops into our calendar, and we put that on the calendar intentionally so that it doesn't get overlooked and pushed aside, but it's a time when the board takes self-evaluation, direction from MASB, other topics that board members bring forward to make our team a stronger team and better able to serve our school district. So I'd like that noted by the public. If there's no other questions or comments on this, we can set this up for a vote, Dr. Liepa, either at the next...
Either next Monday or the organizational meeting, whichever one is the normal practice for us.
Okay, we'll take care of that. The next item is item 2B. This is an item that I was hoping would really never come. This is a discussion on our superintendent search. By now, if you're watching this meeting, you pay close enough attention to the school board on the whole that you probably already know. We are fortunate to have a very, very, very skilled and experienced superintendent who's led Livonia Public Schools for the last 12 years. He is been recognized as such in being Superintendent of the Year for the Tri-County area this past year, and it is with an enormous amount of mixed feelings that like those of you know who may not know, that Dr. Randy Liepa has been offered the position of Superintendent for Wayne Risa. So he will be a superintendent over all 33 school districts in the county of Wayne. We are very, very proud of him. thrilled that he can use his skill set to benefit not only Livonia Public Schools, but all kids, all students in the state of in Wayne County and the state of Michigan, and hopefully have a larger voice and a more prominent seat in making state decisions as they pertain to education, which we certainly know, those of us at this table know, those decisions need to be made, that work needs to be done. So we're thrilled to have such an advocate for Livonia Public Schools sitting at that table. On the other hand, one of the major responsibilities of the board, the board has three main responsibilities, and one of them is hire and evaluate your superintendent. For years, I've been grateful that we've never had to deal with the hire part, because we had that taken care of. But now we do have a monumental task in filling some very big shoes left behind by Dr. Liepa. And this board takes that task very, very seriously. So tonight, for the first time, we will delve into that whole process. And Dana Winery will be working along with us in addition to Dr. Liepa in guiding our board through this process and acting as liaison for the board throughout the whole process from here to a new superintendent. So with that, I'll turn it over to both Dr. Liepa and Mr. Winery.
Thank you very much. A couple of things. First of all, our school district's in great condition to move forward, and as you know, I've mentioned this publicly. We have a remarkable group of central office administrators. We have a great group of building administrators, and we have a lot of stability in our school district. And so we're going to be in great shape moving ahead. We're going to have everything in place as we're moving ahead. We are not going to miss a beat in regards to preparing for another school year this year. And so that I am definitely confident in, and I'm very confident that part of that stability is because of the Board of Education that we have here. And I know that you're going to do a great job as you go through for the community this particular process. And so I think we're in great shape. And one of the things that we're doing tonight is probably jumping the gun just a little bit, but it's because we want to be on top of this and we want to get moving as quickly as I know that you want to get moving as quickly as you possibly can. And so while I haven't officially signed the contract, which should happen shortly, and I have not officially turned in my resignation letter, which should happen shortly, there's no reason we can't start these conversations about what needs to be done. So when that happens, we'll be in good shape. I'm not looking at starting at RISA until August, and so we have, I think, plenty of transition time here to make sure that we're well ready to go for the start of the school year. And so again, I think we're in great shape with a very stable organization that's going to allow us to continue to provide great service to kids. So having said that, I have gotten some information for you just for your background information, because this really is, as Colleen mentioned, your responsibility, and I know you are going to be leading each other through the process. And one of the things that we would typically see in a school district going through this process is to identify a staff liaison to help you. And of course, it makes all the sense in the world to have our Director of Human Resources, Dana Winery, help you through that process, and he's well prepared to be able to do so. As we look at your options in regards to how you do this and how you go through the process, typically what you're going to see in most school districts is that they hire professional help to lead you through the way. And so they typically, school districts, especially large school districts like Livonia, will hire a search firm to go ahead and lead you through the process. You get to make all the decisions, make no mistake about it, but they do all of the work along with Dana as your staff person to get the information and move the process along to make sure you have great candidates and you have a great process in place to go ahead and select a new superintendent. And so they're going to coordinate all the activities. If you decide to hire a search firm, what they would do is develop a profile of who you want for a superintendent. They're going to create a job posting. They're going to advertise that posting. They're going to go out and recruit candidates. They're going to accept applications. They're going to help you screen applications and help you develop a process to identify finalists, and then interviews. They'll help you with interview questions and interview process, and then they'll help you with the selection process. And so, believe me, they will come in and they can provide very detailed support all the way through. So you are just making the decisions, and they're going through a very well-established, well-oiled process to get you there. And so you should feel good about that if you so choose to move in that direction. And in order to, like I said, expedite the process, what I've done is provided some information for you with a list of both Michigan and national firms that do searches. And so you should have a packet, and again, I sent you this over the weekend, but you have a little packet here. The second page of the packet identifies different national and Michigan search firms that are well-known. And on top of that, this afternoon, I provided for you this additional sheet that identifies, at least for the national firms, the types of school districts that they've done. I did not provide that for the Michigan firms because they've done tons. You know, the 3 Michigan firms that are listed have done just multiple Michigan searches. And so you can know that going in when you're thinking about who you may want to interview if you want to use this process. And again, the process that we're talking about right now is just making sure that you're looking at the process of getting a firm to help you out. They're going to do all the legwork as you move ahead. I also provided for you a summary sheet that actually Wayne Risa used as it related to the types of key pieces of information that you probably would want as it relates to helping you determine which firm is the right search firm for you, okay? And so I think this is a good starting point in regards to the types of things that you will utilize to evaluate these different search firms. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a few minutes. But what I want to highlight is if you choose any of these firms that I think that are on the list, you can't go wrong. And so it's pretty nerve-wracking thinking about, oh my gosh, who's the best firm? Who should we go with? How are we going to evaluate this? We'll talk about how to get there, but I really don't believe you can make a mistake with this. They're all very, very qualified firms, and they've all done this a ton. And so if you went to any of their websites, you would see multiple postings of school districts across Michigan and across the Midwest where they're currently engaged in superintendent searches and where they've done them in the past. And so I don't want you to feel, at least my perspective is, while you certainly want to hire the firm that's going to meet, best fit Livonia, don't feel all this pressure that somehow you're going to screw this up, because they're all really good and they've all done it a lot. So I want to impress on that. And really what it's going to be like is the process, in my eyes, when you hire Plant Moran Cressa to be our owner's rep. And so if you remember, we went out, we set up some criteria, we collected information, and then we did some interviews. And from there, you guys went and made the choice. And really, very honestly, even though you chose Cressa, you probably couldn't have gone wrong with some of the other firms that had put in. Or if you think about when we selected our architects or our construction managers, when you're sitting there interviewing George Auck and McCarthy Smith and Barton Mallow, guess what? You're trying to find the right fit, but you can't go wrong with any one of them. They have a very strong, proven track record. And that's going to be the same exact process that I think you'll find, or the same exact results you'll find as you go through this process tonight. So if I could just take a step back for a second with that information that you have, talk about probably what you want to try to accomplish tonight, and then I'll just turn it back over to you, Colleen, and Dana and I are here as resources as you sort through some of these questions that you want to have answered so we can get the process moving forward. So I think first and foremost, you need to have conversation about, do you want to hire a search firm? If you don't, we could provide Dana the responsibility for working with a committee on the board, and you guys could go about and do that yourselves. I mean, it's not unprecedented. Typically, maybe if there were only a couple of internal candidates, maybe that would be a more normal process, but while it's not a normal process, it's an option for you. So you have to really ask yourself that question and make sure that you're comfortable that you want to do that. Second, what I would suggest then is you really want to ask yourself, talk a little bit about these firms here and who you'd like to at least provide an RFP to you and who you would want to interview. And so you can talk about the firms that I have listed. Maybe one of you know another firm that I'm not aware of or isn't on the list. You can talk about that process tonight. And again, you shouldn't feel confined about making a mistake, because you're just choosing who you want to really fill out an RFP, similar to what we did when we went out and, again, hired an owner's rep. So you probably want to talk about those firms and then make a decision, well, how many do we really want to interview? And after you do that, if you have a good handle on who you want to interview, what we can do then is, if you give us that direction tonight, we can actually go and contact these search firms and say, we're interested in talking to you, and we need dates. And so the other thing I'd suggest tonight is you talk about your calendar. And I know you're anxious to get rolling on this as quickly as possible, but talk about your calendar tonight and see, let's get some dates together, because then we can get them to Dana, and he can start to make the contacts with people. And then again, have a conversation about the criteria in regards to what we'd want to have in an RFP. And if the criteria that I've provided tonight is a good start, we can go ahead and do that. We could probably take a look at a couple other RFPs to see if we've missed anything. And don't feel like, tonight's the only night you can look at this. In a day or two, if there's some other information that you think should be important in regards to them formally presenting to you, separate from what's on the list here, feel free to give those suggestions. We'll add it to the list, and that can be part of the RFP that we would actually contact firms for. So, so with that, if it's okay, Colleen, I'm going to turn it back over to you. And I've got the questions here. We'll just take one question at a time.
Okay.
So the first question I had was, do you want to use a search firm?
Board members, I'm open for comments at this point. Who would like to share their thoughts on whether or not we want to have a search firm? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, President Burton. We're all pretty inexperienced at this. Although I've just gone through a superintendent search for Parks and Recreation, that's on a bit of a different scale. The closest that we have come as a board to doing anything like this was 3 or 4 years ago, when we talked to a couple of firms to get an idea when we were discussing Dr. Liepa's contract. I thought that process was an excellent process. They gave us good information. At that point, it was more advisory than anything. We were looking to see where Dr. Liepa stood in the hierarchy of superintendents. But I certainly would feel more comfortable having someone with the experience in doing this. This is an extremely important position that we're going to fill. And I just think, given what we are as a board, we would be much better off if we had a firm to guide us, such as we're doing with Plant Moran as our owner's representative. We couldn't have done that on our own, I don't think. So my feeling is, yes, we want to have some firm guide us through this process with Dana's help. I think that's a good process.
Other thoughts? Other board members? Mrs. Bonfield?
I agree with Mr. Johnson, and in addition, as we've talked with many of our budget cuts, central office is understaffed, and I think in addition, in order to make this go smoothly and to not overburden some of our staff members, that we could most certainly use the professional assistance.
Okay. And I would, with as important a role as the board has, I mean, it is solely ours. I would like to hear from each one of our board members on each one of these questions that we can pose to folks.
I think
Mr.
Mr. Johnson stated it perfectly, that this is the most important position in our district. 15,000 kids. We need to get it right, so we need to get experts in to guide us through and make sure we find the very best candidates. So I agree 100%.
I'm in agreement. I just think it's the best thing that we could do for our district at this time.
Okay. Mrs. Laura?
Thank you. I'm totally in agreement. I just have two concerns, and not negative concerns at all. Do we have any idea the cost of the fees? And are we going to get into that?
What will happen is, and again, you're
They
only tied into doing interviews in the RFP. When the RFPs come back, they'll have the fee quotes. That will be part of the RFP that you will ask for. So every firm will provide a price in regards to the fee. I would say, you're going to be looking at, well, I don't even know. I haven't really even looked into that. It'll be over $20,000 would be my guess. For a district
and
our
they're
size.
probably all in the same range, close to each
That would be
other.
my guess, too.
I would think so.
Mhm.
My second question is, from my understanding, one of the responsibilities of the firm is to put out, to publish this, like a posting, I guess.
Yep.
And I understand that some firms actually do recruit.
Correct.
And do we make that part of our questions when
Absolutely.
we interview and so on? Because I think
Absolutely.
that would behoove us.
Yeah, if you were creating a rubric, that would be probably high on your list, would be my guess, of something that you'd want to hear from every firm about, and that would be part of their evaluation.
Thank you.
Because it's one thing to do a good job through the process, it's another thing to get a good pool of candidates.
Mrs. Jarvis?
I agree with what Mr. Johnson said. It makes sense to hire a firm. And I also want to stress the importance of not overlooking Dr. Liepa's personal experience. He knows the job, he knows the district, and he knows superintendents and assistant superintendents across the state. And we would be remiss in not taking advantage of that knowledge.
I agree with you. I agree with everything that has been said of my colleagues. I absolutely want to use a search firm for this process for all the reasons that have been stated. I also put a very, very high importance personally on the ability of the firm to recruit for this position. This is, in my opinion, this is not simply a post it and see who comes, but these search firms deal with superintendents all the time, and they know who are the really, really high-quality superintendents. That's the kind of individual that I want to see fill this position, and I absolutely, one of my highest priorities is a firm who can very aggressively recruit high-quality candidates for this position. We are absolutely in agreement on using a search firm. As far as which firms, we want to take out the list that has been provided to us. As Dr. Liepa said, if anyone knows of a firm they would like to add to this list, they are welcome to suggest that. I don't. We have on this list 5 national search firms and, yes, and 3 Michigan search firms. As far as thoughts on, let's take this just in some pieces. As far as the 3 Michigan search firms, do folks have opinions on dealing with let's see here, how do I phrase this? I'd like your thoughts really on whether we're going to go strictly with Michigan search firms or national search firms also. What are your thoughts on that, whether we should limit this list to Michigan or national? My personal thought is I would like to see a combination of both. I would absolutely want to include our Michigan search firms, but simply because a firm is national does not mean it does not have strong Michigan experience. But I'd like to get everyone's thoughts on that. Mrs. Bonnefield.
I agree. I would like to at least interview a couple international firms.
You mean national firms?
Yes, national firms, sorry. I think they're going to lend a different flavor for us. They're going to have a different perspective, and I think it's important to at least see what they have to offer.
Other thoughts? Mr. Johnson?
I tend to agree. While I'd like to rely on Michigan firms because they're more home-based, looking at the list of national firms, we have a number of them that truly have a lot of experience in the state of Michigan. So I'm certainly willing to have a blend, a combination of them as well.
Other thoughts on this question?
I'm in agreement that we should take a sampling of both and, see what they have to offer. If we set the criteria, and we can review the criteria once they submit their proposals. So I think it's a good start.
I agree also.
I agree as well.
So do I.
Alrighty. Some of these are easier than others. That being said, there are 8 firms here. That I would think is too many to interview. We need to whittle this down to a reasonable number, and what that reasonable number is a little bit subjective. Dana, would you like to give us some guidance here, or Dr. Liepa, some suggestions on what number we should be shooting for here?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would suggest, I don't think there's a right number, you're 100% right, Colleen. The only thing I would suggest is just spending a couple of minutes on the national search firms and giving you a little bit more background in each one of them as it relates to, the searches that they've done in Michigan. And so if I was looking at the first one, BWP and Associates, they're an Illinois firm, and they've basically done mostly West Side. If you look at their list, that was sort of the way I looked at it when I saw Hazard and Young. The one comment I'd make about Hazard and Young is several of the searches on there are older searches, and so I think they've done recent searches, and I think it was Lansing and Portage, but the Plymouth Canton search was actually 2 superintendents ago, and the Birmingham and Bloomfield searches were 2 superintendents ago. The Grosse Pointe one was 2 superintendents ago. The Flint one, I think they're doing right now.
Right.
So that's just a little bit of background. So Hazard's done quite a few, but their most recent, some of them aren't quite as recent as others. Ray and Associates, I couldn't find the specific Michigan firm, school districts that they've worked with. I just know that they've used the state, they've done the state search. And so they didn't have very much information on their website compared to the other search firms. School Exec Connect, they've done a lot in this area, a lot of districts similar to Livonia, and those are all pretty recent. Or several of those, I should say, like the Farmington one was just one they just completed last year. And so several of those are within the last, the Rochester a few years ago, those are all within the last 3, 4, 5 years. And again, the Stevens and Associate, I couldn't find anything on their website about any. They're pretty much based in Wisconsin. Most of the postings that I saw were Wisconsin-based on their website, and I didn't see any connection as it related to Michigan school districts. I'm guessing there are some, otherwise they wouldn't have been on the resale list, but I couldn't find anything. And so really, yeah, I mean, you probably want to shoot for 4 to 6, but if 4 felt like too many and 6 felt like too few, I wouldn't discourage you from doing, 3 or 7. I think the Michigan search firms are well established here in Michigan and have done a significant amount of searches.
Okay. Mr. Centers?
As far as the national firm, School Exec Connect really does stand out because of the local searches and recent local searches. So that's one that I would like to see, ideally, that we reach out to them. If I had to make a second choice, I think
Do
Ray
we
was-
want to stop with that one just to see if others
Okay,
agree or
yeah,
disagree
sure.
with that? Just
Let's
because
do
if
that.
there's agree, we'll just throw them right in the pile.
Okay.
I
Agree.
agree with that. I went on the websites also and did some homework and had that one start as my first
Mhm.
choice.
Yeah.
Okay. Tammy, you said agree? Okay.
I agree too.
Okay.
I'm
Eileen
good.
and Mark?
Yeah,
Yes,
I think so,
I'm good
yes.
with that.
Yep. I agree also. So if everyone on this whole board wants to interview them, let's interview them. All righty. Mrs. Bonnefield?
So, just to make sure that we're all going through what we're doing is we're picking the firms to send RFPs out to, not picking the firms that we're gonna interview. We're gonna get the RFPs and then.
No,
we'll-
actually,
we would pick the-
we'll do those, just to expedite the process. What we'll do is we'll contact them and have them do an RFP, and this is very similar to what you did when you hired the owner's rep.
Okay,
So we'll get the RFP out, we'll get the information from the RFP, and then they will come and do the interview.
okay, so
Yeah.
we're
So
not
those will
gonna
handle,
whittle them
those will
down
happen
from-
simultaneously.
Okay.
Now, if you want to, make no mistake, if you guys want to go ahead and get the RFPs and then whittle it down even more, you can do that, but now you're talking, you're now into a month before you'll be selecting a search firm.
Okay.
So that was the only issue with that, and I know you're anxious to get rolling. So those are the pros and cons.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Mrs. Laura?
One interesting thought, not that I'm suggesting that we show any interest in this firm or not, but the first one, BWP,
Mhm.
when I went on the website, all the administrators in that firm appear to be former superintendents, which I thought was interesting.
Okay. All righty. Is there another national firm, because if we're looking at just the national firms right now, is there another national firm that folks would like to consider? Mr. Johnson?
I like the BWP and Associates, and I'll tell you why. Although it looks like they're primarily west side. They're big school districts. Ann Arbor, East Lansing, Grand Rapids. So it would appear to me as though they have some experience in recruiting or searching for large school districts. And to me, I think that's important, that they have that kind of exposure.
Okay. Other thoughts on BWP? Mrs. Bonnefield?
Does anyone know, is it the current Grand Rapids superintendent that they hired that's on this list, or was this one?
I don't know.
We don't know.
I think this list is their former. It's been a while. I
She's
think.
been superintendent for a couple of years now.
Just a couple of years, yeah.
Mhm. Other thoughts on BWP? I don't have a real strong feeling on them one way or the other. Anybody else at this point? All right, let's,
I do like Mark's logic.
Yeah.
If you look at the
That's
the
one
size of
man.
the districts.
yeah.
That's a great argument, that they probably have some familiarity with the type of candidate that we're looking for, the type of profile we're looking for. And I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. Mrs. Jarvis?
Not with BWP in particular, but if anyone has any awareness of a situation where a firm brought in a superintendent and it wasn't really a good match, and people just sat there and said, well, what were they thinking? You know, we could cross them off the list, just to.
And you're not
narrow
going to
our-
see any on the list that I provided to you. So
Okay.
it's a great question, but none of that won't happen. Now, are there individual cases? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, you seven are going to own the vote, not the search firm. Their job is to get you good candidates. And you guys, will, at the end of the day, own the fact that, because they're not there actually even to make a match for you. They're there to walk you through the process. And you guys are the ones who ultimately will make that choice. So, yeah, there's going to be, every once in a while, there's going to be a mismatch, a clunker, it didn't work out. Your big question at the end of the day for these firms are, did they bring quality candidates forward to the Board of Education? And, did they do a thorough process? Again, the pool's not all that deep out there, so they're going to be working their tails off to get good candidates forward to you. And I think, fortunately, you've got a very attractive school district to be able to recruit from. But I think that of all the people here, they're going to do a quality job getting you through the process. A great question.
The other thing we have to look at along that line also is when it isn't a good match, when it doesn't turn out in the long run, it may not necessarily be the fault of either the search firm or the superintendent. We've all been to enough MASB events and classes and so forth that we know enough about other districts in the state of Michigan to know that if you have a school board who's sending a superintendent in 7 different directions, or even 4 or 5 different directions, that's not the fault of the superintendent, that eventually they throw up their hands and say, I'm going to go work for a district where I have one team sending me in a direction. This board has worked really, really hard to make sure that we are a team directing our superintendent as one unit. So we need to keep that in mind too. If we do have a situation where a superintendent left, we need to take a deeper look at why before we pass judgment on it being any one individual's fault. Mrs. Bonnefield?
I would like to suggest for right now that we add BWP to the list, and then I would then suggest that we move on to Michigan firms and take a look at Michigan firms.
Does anyone else have other thoughts? Yes. Mrs. Zora?
That's fine too, but following the logic with BWP that they have a number of large districts, the second one, Hazard, Young, and so forth, were involved with Grosse Pointe, West Bloomfield, Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills, Plymouth, Canton, Lansing. So if we're following that same logic, maybe we should take a look at that one also.
The only flip side of that is that several of those searches were quite a while ago.
Right.
They're not recent searches.
And I think
So-
that, isn't that the same with BWP also? Weren't they a while ago too? Because there wasn't anything in, unless I missed it, BWP, that they had listed for current searches.
I don't know.
Or
Ongoing, there weren't any
recent
current ongoing
searches.
searches.
Or recent searches.
Yeah. Again, it has to do with how much time, it's another half hour to 45 minutes,
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with asking them to provide a proposal. And the other thing that could happen, very honestly, depending on how many searches they have going on, you could call BWP or Hazard Young, and they may say, you know, we don't have the capacity to do it this summer. That's always a possibility too. So, you know, nothing wrong if you feel that one's pretty good on there. There's nothing wrong with inviting them to come. And
I think Mrs.
Mrs.
McDowell.
Oh, well, I guess my thought process is, you know, if we sent them, well, maybe I need clarification on how we're going to process this. Are we going to send them a proposal with a letter of introduction explaining what we're looking for? Is that how we're going to do it, or?
we're gonna develop an RFP, and Dana's gonna call them each individually on the phone and say, we've got a significant superintendent search going on. We have an RFP we'd like you to complete, and are you interested? And so Dana will make that phone call. If they're interested, we'll send them the information. They'll then complete the information, and they will simultaneously get that information to you to review, and then you'll interview them. So there's not like I said, unless you want to add a couple weeks into the process, there's not a weeding out process after you get the RFPs. You can do it, it's just going to add some time onto your work. So, you know, you might be better off, if you want to add more rather than less, you might be better off adding more and just spending the extra 45 minutes to interview and get the RFP from them, as opposed to like looking through the RFPs and then trying to go from 6 to 4. I think, very honestly, I think the RFPs aren't going to tell the whole story. You're going to want to talk to them before you slim it down.
And I know that my own opinion is I don't want to take that in two separate steps. This is enormously important, but time is also of the essence. So I don't want to add another couple of weeks, especially because we already have a holiday week that's going to postpone everything, a week. So I definitely want to do the RFP and interview process all in one step.
So the question is, do you want to add Hazard to the mix?
I'm okay with
I'm not hearing
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it hurts.
No, I don't
I'd
think
rather
so
have more
either.
choices than less choices.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
And they may come back with us, like you said, and say.
Yeah, they may come back. That's the thing. You might be sitting there 6 or 7, and then at the end of the day have 4 or 5 because they're tied up with other searches.
Right. I have one thought regarding Ray and Associates. I don't see, that they have listed a whole lot of other superintendent searches. They did do the Michigan State superintendent search. While I was not impressed with the interview process that I observed, I understand that the recruiting was very, very strong. So I have mixed feelings on whether or not we should include Ray and Associates in that mix for that reason.
Yeah,
I'd like
just
to-
a little bit of background information to help you. Ray and Associates, as it relates to Michigan, in my opinion, did the state superintendent search because they employ Tim Quinn, who's done 1,000 superintendent searches. He used to work for MLI. And so MLI, when you think about MLI and the searches they've done in the past, many of those searches were done with Tim Quinn. And so he's a bit of a guru in that regard. But they may not be doing a ton other, it might have been an issue where they don't do a lot of Michigan searches, they're in Iowa. But because of their connection with Tim Quinn and because people know Tim Quinn in Michigan, that's how we ended up doing the state superintendent search. They did a very formidable job in regards to the work that they did. A big piece would be who gets assigned from their group. So, like everybody on the list, they're certainly competent if they had the right mix. But I don't think they have outside of it's an issue of Tim Quinn or no Tim Quinn really because they don't have the same. And I know Tim lives in Traverse City, and Traverse City is a nice place to be in the summer, and I don't know what his interest of doing a search is. Maybe they have other people. I don't know that. It's up to you if you want to throw them in the mix or not. They certainly have the ability to do quality work, but that will be dependent on how that all plays out. They did not have a very impressive website, I'll tell you that. Yeah. So, again, it's purely up to you guys. You're not going to go wrong with where you're at right now, so. If you didn't include them, you're not going to go wrong. If you included them in, you're not going to go wrong. Or maybe it's a simple phone call to say who's going to be the person assigned, and if it's not someone that's well known to do superintendent searches, from Michigan, then we walk away from it. It's up to you guys.
Dr. Lee, could we specify that if that we specifically have heard Tim Quinn held in high regard, and if he specifically will be available, we may be interested, and if not.
Yeah, then we'll put him off the list. Is that okay with everybody?
Well, my question, that was your question, is that even possible? If that is possible, is this board interested in going that direction or not? And I could go either way on that decision. Mrs. Jarvis?
Well, given that we've already got 3 national ones that we're interested in, I'd like to look at some of the state-based ones, the Michigan-based ones. If we can't find a Michigan-based one that we feel strongly about, certainly we could go back to the national list. But I would like to see if we have anyone in the state that we'd like to work with.
Other thoughts?
You know, I am pretty tempted, just because the state superintendent search was so recent, and if Tim is available, he's basically overturned every stone in the state. So he really knows who's out there right now, who might be looking to upgrade or leave. So there is a temptation there, but I could go either way.
That is a good point. And Dr. Lee, but Tim Quinn was the one who did the state search, correct?
Correct.
So his
And
information.
he recruited?
What's that?
He recruited?
Oh, Big Ten.
Okay.
I
It
would-
doesn't hurt.
I
No,
would
it
support
doesn't.
your
Let's
idea
see.
if he's available to be a candidate, you know, that would be of interest to us, I think, but otherwise, maybe we just go with the 3 that we have.
As far as the national firms.
Yeah, I think that's a
Other
great
thoughts?
idea. Just
Agree
fill
with
them
that.
out and see what they have to say.
Great.
I'm in agreement.
Okay, we've
So I'm
got
hearing-
direction on the national firms?
Yep, so Tim Quinn, or rather, Ray and Associates, only if Tim Quinn is available. If he is not for whatever reason, then we will pass. Okay.
Great.
With the Michigan firms, there are 3 very strong Michigan firms, all that have different merits. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable eliminating any of them for various reasons. Our school district works with at least 2 of these firms on a regular basis with Metropolitan Detroit Bureau of School Studies and with MASB. And Michigan Leadership Institute comes highly recommended. We've seen them used on a lot of searches. I don't know that I'm comfortable necessarily eliminating any of the 3 of them, but that's just my thought. What are the thoughts of the board members? Mrs. Bonfield?
I agree. I agree that I would like to interview all 3 of them.
Okay.
I
Other
have
thoughts?
I have those same thoughts.
Yeah, I do too. So
I can go
I'm
with that.
fine.
This end of the table?
Yeah, I'm comfortable interviewing all 3. I do appreciate MASB for all the instruction and services they provide us. I have heard mixed feedback about their superintendent searches. But again, it'd be interesting to hear what they have to say about.
We may get quite a bit of overlap,
Yes.
because there's only so many superintendents in Michigan. On the other hand, it would be nice to see what they all had to say.
And keep in mind too, that this is just selecting the
The
firm.
firm,
they're not-
This
they're
is-
not
this is
talking
even-
about
Right.
Yeah.
Right, this is not even everyone's gonna bring in all their candidates
No.
yet. This is just
No,
talking to
they're
the
just talking
firms.
about process.
Right.
Process
Good
and
point.
price.
And figuring out who's going to be the best fit for our district.
Yes.
Then they will go out and begin their work.
Yeah.
Right.
If they've not already begun turning stones over already.
Where is MLI? I don't know where that is. Osaniki?
Asanique.
The person who now is in charge of MLI lives up north somewhere, but he's from metropolitan Detroit, and they employ several different people from all over the state.
Asanique is
Well-
in the Alpena area.
Yeah. All very qualified firms that, like I said, they've done this, all of them have done this on many occasions, so no one's gonna walk in and say, yeah, well, we haven't done one in 3 or 4 years, but that will not be the case. They're gonna come in and say, yep, we did this one this year, we got 3 going on right now, boom, boom, boom.
I think there's a better chance that some of these firms might be more familiar with Livonia and what we're like and.
Yep, that's what you're gonna hear in the interviews. That's what that'll be right now it's just sort of sorting out who you wanna hear from, and then they'll come and they'll let you know
Yeah.
why they're good.
So the number that we have right now, we have whittled it down to six.
6 plus 1.
For sure, and potentially a seventh if Tim Quinn is available and interested in taking this on. Are you comfortable with going with that large of a number?
Yes.
Let me rephrase it another way. Is anyone not comfortable with that? Is anyone saying that's too large of a number and we need to scale back?
It'll be a
Mr. Bennett?
significant time commitment, but I think everyone on the board.
I mean, certainly if you
is
had more
comfortable
time
with it.
to sort it out through the RFP process, then you could maybe whittle it down, but if you're gonna do them together, yeah, probably more than fewer.
Mrs. Bonnefield?
And I think the point needs to be well taken. This is a summer project, and we may not, they may just say no, that.
They might not have the time.
So it's
Right.
probably at this point, it's better to do more, not counting that every single one of them is going to be favorable to providing our services to us this summer.
I'd rather err on the side of hearing from more than hearing
Right.
from
Absolutely.
fewer. So and then we'll go from there. All right. So we have our list. Dana, you'll be taking care of contacting those firms for us then? Okay.
Not until you give them dates.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Important.
As far as dates go, I did get in contact with each one of you on the board. Miraculously, we have multiple conflicts the week prior to the 4th of July, the week of the 29th, I believe it is, 28th, 29th, through the 4th. Multiple board members are gone on various days. That week is very bad. The blessing comes in the following week, July 6th, all board members appear to be back in town again, which is a wonderful thing. We have, Dr. Lee, I'm sorry, I don't remember, do we have a board meeting scheduled on that 6th of July? I don't
No.
think we do.
No, there's nothing.
Okay.
6th or the 13th.
Okay. And well, not only the 6th, but during that week, we may wind up with a few different nights that we have wind up with commitments doing interviews.
Yeah. As you did when you were interviewing board candidates, you did multiple nights in the same week.
Right, right. And what we may want to do too is do our interviewing, if we could even do it all in one night. Are we interested in doing that all in one evening or stretching it out over two? My personal thought is I would rather do it on one evening, even if we stretched out over a rather long evening, and then take a couple of day break, digest what we've heard, think about it, do any more research we want to do, and come back and have discussion at that point and choose a firm a couple days later. Does that sound like a plan that would work for you, or do you have other thoughts? Mrs. McDonald?
Thank you, President Burton. My only thought is that if we do it all in one night, by the end of the evening, we might not be as sharp as where we were starting at the starting point at the beginning. So I personally think we would be more effective to do it in 2 evenings and then have discussion at a third. I mean, if we're going, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and here we are talking to the last firm, we're gonna be exhausted. And we're not gonna hear what they have to say. So,
I tend to agree with that. If we have 6, possibly 7 firms to interview and they're 45 minutes to an hour, we're going to be going well into midnight if we start at 6.
If
Right.
they're that lengthy.
if they're that
Well-
lengthy,
Yeah, we may need to scale back
Yeah.
a little bit, but, okay.
yeah.
Mr. Johnson?
I agree with Mrs. McDonald. I think if we end up with that number, we may not,
We may
Right.
not.
Right.
but if we do end up with that number, I think it behooves us all to do it over a 2-night. Because our interviews may, if we assign or allot a half an hour, we may end up going longer on one, maybe shorter on another, we don't know. But if we're going to do a thorough job, they may go over. And if you have all of them on one night, it could really be exhausting. And I think Ms. McDonald was right, that by the end of the night, whoever that last firm or two is, they may not be getting our best shot.
Okay.
So I would tend to agree. If there are that many, then we go 2
If we wind
nights.
up
Right.
with, if we wind up with 7
Right.
firms. If we wind up with, a significantly smaller number than that.
And you can always, an option always is to do a Saturday also. And that's purely up to you guys, but sometimes that way you can start early in the day and Yeah, it's a whole day out, but that would be another option. But if you're doing that, you're waiting until the end of the week anyway, so.
Okay,
Yeah, it's just one less fewer day for you guys to try to schedule for yourselves, that's all.
okay.
So if you're looking at the week of July 6th, I just threw out Tuesday and Thursday, or would you rather do Monday and Wednesday and come back on Thursday to make a decision?
I would prefer Monday, Wednesday,
I would
with
too.
a
Thursday.
Thursday
Yeah,
decision-making day.
Yeah.
And we'll just take that week and have that be,
So then Dana, when he makes the phone calls, can tell them that we're looking for either July 6th or July 8th, their calendars on those days, if they're interested in putting in an RFP. And that gives them plenty of time. What I'll do is have them work on getting the paper information to you the week prior to that. Try to get it in your packet by that Thursday, if at all possible.
Okay.
And then you guys will have a couple days to look at it.
so we're looking at interviews on that Monday and Wednesday, come back for a decision on the Thursday.
Mhm.
Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, but I just have a question.
Okay, hang on just a second.
On the 9th? The
Yes.
Thursday we're talking about is the 9th.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Mrs. McGowan, your question?
I just lost my train of thought.
They'll come back.
Sorry. Oh, I don't know. That's terrible, I don't know.
It'll come in.
Okay, Yep.
Oh,
We'll be here.
I know,
We'll be here.
I remember. Is that gonna give these firms enough time to process and submit a proposal?
If not, Dana will come back to you and say they don't have enough time to submit a proposal. My guess is if we're waiting until July 6th, that's plenty of time.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this is what they do full-time.
Yeah, I mean, they've got
Right.
the binder they'll pull out and they'll.
They've done it before,
At least,
once.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, but if we get that feedback, Eileen, when Dana calls, if he gets that feedback, he will certainly let the board president know, and she'll let all of you know that
Okay.
the timeline's too tight.
Okay. I would certainly hope that
Yeah,
timeline
I
works.
wouldn't anticipate that it'll be a problem.
If we hadn't had the holiday weekend there, I would have liked to have seen it pushed up at least a week
Yeah.
closer, because we need to make decisions here. And this just chooses the interviewing firm, or the recruiting firm. This is not
Yeah.
choosing
Yeah,
the
no.
candidate.
Yeah.
And then they gotta go start to do their work. As far as the criteria for the RFP, if you could take a look at your, the letter format with the criteria. Are there any items that you would like eliminated from that list? I do not see any, but does anyone see any items they would like eliminated from that list as far as information we'd like from the firms?
Seems pretty straightforward to me.
Mhm. Then on the flip side, are there other items you would like added, not necessarily interview questions, but for the purpose of the RFP?
And if you don't have any today, please just email Dana with any other ideas you have, over the next few days, because that's not a problem. Even if he contacts the firms and we have some kind of RFP drafted up based on this criteria, there's nothing wrong with us even next Monday calling them up and say, hey, we need one more thing in your packet that you're sending us, or bring this to the interview. That's not a problem.
Okay. And
So-
if you do have anything that you need to email in a couple of days, if you could please copy me on it, so that I can make sure that the whole board gets copied on it, so that everybody has all of the exact same information. Mrs. Laura?
Just a technical thing, third item down, the name
Mhm.
of the person who would be assigned to conduct the search for
Right.
Livonia.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah,
are
this
your...
is just an
Yeah.
example.
This is a sample
Yeah.
letter. Mhm.
What are your thoughts about name of key principles of your firm and highlighted background, or?
Yeah, that's on there. Names of the key, they would provide the biographies.
Okay,
I'll put on there though, and biographies,
okay.
just to make sure that that's clear with them. We don't just get the names, but we get biographies. I'll do that.
Okay.
Everybody follow that? That's on
Yep.
bullet number 2.
Yep.
It
So-
will read names of the key principles of your firm and biographies.
And then for number 3 also, Dr. Leva, so we have bios on the key person, not only the principals in the firm, but the person who's going to be
Gotcha.
conducting our search.
Gotcha.
Do we want
Good
to ask
suggestion.
about recruiting? State that as,
I'd like that information, I'm not exactly sure
Sure,
how
how to
to
get
how
it.
to how to
Yeah,
ask
that's
it.
my question.
Uh-huh.
I had the
Yeah,
same
that's
thought.
my
I was
question.
Describe
thinking
your
really-
process to attract candidates.
okay,
Oh, nice.
good.
That
yeah.
works. Mrs. Jarvis?
On the fourth item, the description of demonstrated success in conducting superintendent searches, I wonder if they can break that down, not only their firm as a whole, but also the person with whom we'll be working, if they're
That's on
personally
there.
successful.
I think that's the third bullet. Liz, are we missing something?
Well, I think what you're saying, Liz, it sounds like specifically the person who you would assign to us,
Mhm.
what is their demonstrated
Yeah, their
success
track record, not only the
specifically.
corporate track record, but.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But this,
Yeah.
this individual person. Mhm.
I'm sorry. Gotcha.
That's a good question.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that is.
Got it. Plus their track record.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Good suggestions. Any other thoughts?
Okay.
Are we all set then?
I think we're ready to go. Dana's got his marching orders, and Dana will
Okay.
stay in contact with you through the process. Certainly, if you need anything from Dana or I through the process, you just ask. We're here to help. So I think you'll be off to a good start. And like I said, I don't think you can make a mistake. You'll have a tough decision to make.
I hope you have a tough decision to make. That's a
Yep.
good thing.
Yep. Absolutely.
All righty. Anybody else have any other questions or comments on the superintendent search at this point? We'll have several as we go along. All right. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Lipa, for your background information on gathering some of those pieces for us, and thank you, Mr. Wainwright, for your help now and for the next several weeks. The next item on our agenda is Finance Committee. Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Burton. We have several items to address on the Finance Committee tonight, and the first one is the discussion of the budget for 2015-2016 with Ms. Abby.
Thank you very much, everybody. Good evening. As you know, for several months, we have been keeping the board up to date on where we are in the 2015-2016 budget process, beginning back in early winter when we first get an announcement from the governor as to what their expectations for the next fiscal year look like, and then as we watch the process of the House and the Senate work through the legislative process and through the consensus that just happened a little over a week ago. So it's been a long process, and we've kept the board up to date throughout that process with what our assumptions and estimates are and what our plans were. Of course, during that process, we also had our budget hearings, or the Board of Education had their budget hearings and had input from the community as well. Tonight, I'm going to kind of bring you up to date with where we are, what our recommendations are for the coming school year. Dr. Lipa is going to fill you in on some of the very specific budget recommendations that we're making this evening, but I'm just going to kind of bring you up to date on the numbers that you have in front of you. You did get in your packet a memo from me and some basic information. You have the budget recommendation page, and then behind that, the budget assumptions. So I'm going to kind of go between those two pages right now and just tell you what are these numbers, what do they mean, and where they come from. So the beginning fund balance that you're looking at for next school year, beginning July 1, of $1.7 million. You'll recall that we adopted that budget, the Board of Education adopted that budget. That was our final 2014-15 budget amendment. So that's our projection on where we should end up this June 30th, so coming up. As you know, it takes us a little while through the summer to actually work through all those numbers through the audit process. Could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit lower, but that is our projection right now, that we'll start next year with $1.7 million. The projected revenues and expenditures, we start with typically what is the March budget amendment, and so that's kind of mid-year through, so we would have started with last year, or this past March budget amendment, and then made adjustments to that if there were any one-time revenues or expenses or any other adjustments that we need to make. Those numbers that you're looking at right there, the $139.7 million for revenue, $145.9 million for expenditures, or that deficit of a little over $6 million, generally reflects what we've been talking about and in other documents that you've seen throughout the year. I did note a couple of exceptions. Number one is as we've talked throughout the spring, we've talked about using budget numbers with a $50 foundation allowance increase. Of course, foundation allowance increase is actually $25, so half of that, or about a difference of about $357,000 for Livonia. So that revenue number was reduced by that. The property casualty insurance actual numbers for next year came in about $200,000 higher than we anticipated. That number is reflected in the expenditure budget. And then the other one adjustment that we made, you may recall that we had in this fiscal year an agreement with our unions, somewhere between 0.5% and 1% off schedule that we paid last December. So we also adjusted the expenditures by that. That was about $500,000 in total. So you've seen most of these numbers before, but those are the most updated numbers. So that gets us to where the revenues, how did I project those revenues to begin with? And if you look on the budget assumption page, again, the revenue for state aid, we're expecting an enrollment decline due to birth rates of about 300 students. Dr. Leopold will talk later about how that's offset by school of choice. We're looking at a foundation increase again of the $25. Also in revenues, we had this year, this fiscal year, one-time revenues that we used from other sources. Those three items together, the transfer from capital projects, that's what we call our B4 fund or our technology fund. That's the old Durant settlement money that we've used to upgrade equipment over the last, I want to say, probably almost 20 years now. So we use money from that fund to supplement our budget this year, mostly for textbooks and curriculum. We had also sold property, and you'll recall we used some of that to supplement our general fund budget this year. That's the $77,000, and then part of that we also, if you remember, purchased 3 trucks with that money. And then we also had at-risk carryover funds that we have this year, for this fiscal year, that we will not have as much of for 15-16. So that's because 2 years ago, we saved a little bit more money. We didn't use all of our at-risk allocation. We got to use some of that for this school year, 14-15, but we won't have as much available for 15-16. On the expenditure side, does that make sense before I move on to expenditures? Okay. Expenditures on the health insurance, our cost for increased health insurance is approximately 3% at $537,000. You'll recall when we looked at the final budget amendment for this school year that the Health and Welfare Fund, we're actually spending more money than we're getting in revenues, and what that means is we're actually supplementing the general fund budget to the tune of about $1.3 to $1.5 million. So while there is a fund balance in the Health and Welfare Fund, that won't last forever. So this $300,000 I have on there, that reduces that deficit, because eventually what will happen is we won't have that money. We'll have to put that whole budget back into the general fund. At some point, we'll have to do that. So this allows us to gradually move into that. So rather than trying to, 2 years down the road, say, oh, now we have to add $1.5 million into the general fund budget. So that's what that $300,000 is. And again, like I said, property casualty insurance is a $200,000 increase. Those are the actual numbers that we've gotten from the company. We just looked at fuel, utilities, et cetera. That's a pretty modest increase at 1%. And then again, the one-time teacher costs and the savings from teachers' costs. This is what we look at every year when we just talk about the normal. If we're losing 300 students, you know, we have less need for as many teachers. And then if we have some teachers retiring, you know, when we rehire, that's at a less expensive cost, just difference in where they are on the salary schedule. So that's independent of the early retirement incentive, which is above and beyond that. So those are the assumptions that we use to build the budget. And then I think Dr. Leopold wants to kind of go through where we are now today with what we've done with cost-saving revenue enhancement items, program-related items, and then other recommendations in the budget.
So, again, Lisa's provided the detail in regards to how we get to the revenue and expenditure projections. And so we knew it was going to be pretty scary, and that's why we've been talking budget really, if you remember, since last time this year. We said that we were literally going to start out in the fall and talk about budget all year long, and we did. We developed a district-wide administrative budget committee. In January, we went out to the public, as Lisa mentioned, and got feedback from our public because we knew that the numbers were looking pretty tough. And I would highlight, as Lisa outlined, that there were several one-time revenue pieces in this current year budget that we knew wouldn't be there for next year, on top of enrollment decline, et cetera, et cetera. And so because of those reasons, you're looking at that projected budget deficit of about $6.2 million, just in that much less money coming in versus dollars that are being spent. And that was the challenge that we had in front of us. I actually feel very good with where we're at with this budget for next year, but certainly feel very precarious in regards to, you know, our overall financial condition. As you know, we've been talking for the last 5 months about revenue enhancement cost-saving items, because the feedback that we received in January was that let's look at those, if at all possible, before we reduce programs in our schools. And so I think that's very reflective in our budget, what the community told us when we met with them in January. And so, as you know, we've covered these things in the past, but we have the sale of property, which we hope to be bringing to you final recommendations within the next several weeks. We have the cell tower agreement, which we're trying to finalize. As I said, that's not an easy agreement to work out at all, and we're planning on that working next year. So we need to get that done, but that's a big piece that we're still trying to finalize, and you've given us the authority to go and try to finalize that. You've given us the authority to add an additional 100 students through school of choice at the early grades. You've given us authority to go ahead and close the McKinley and Perrinville schools and generate savings there. You've given us hopefully the authority, we talked about it on the Cooper soccer lease, and so I've got those details a little bit later tonight. And then also, you've already approved an early retirement incentive for us, and we were successful in implementing that, and we're estimating about $1 million in staff savings above and beyond what Lisa had mentioned on the prior page. And so if you add those up, assuming we're successful selling the property and assuming we're successful with the cell tower agreement, we're looking at about $4 million of cost-saving revenue enhancement items. Wasn't quite enough to get us there, and so we have an additional $1 million of recommendations to you. As it relates to program-related items, we're looking at, of the probably well over 700 classroom teachers that we have, reducing 2 FTEs above and beyond, I want to highlight this, above and beyond what we would normally reduce because of enrollment decline. And so we have reduced teaching positions because of enrollment decline, and that helps us maintain our existing staffing ratios. And so we've reduced some positions for that, and above and beyond that, we're talking 2 FTEs. And while that may not sound like a lot, we know that that's difficult because at the secondary level, it'll be 5 less classes that we're offering somewhere in our school district. And at the elementary level, while it won't impact very many classrooms, there'll be a handful of classrooms that will be impacted because we have 1 less staff person to put to lower class size. And so we are recommending that in order to get it to a balanced budget. And then, as you know, we've already brought some textbook purchases forward to you for the AP classes because we're required to do that if they're going to continue to be AP classes. We also have some replacement materials for our reading program and for our math and our science program. We also have the MESA units that we started with our reading program that we're looking at maintaining. But outside of that, we have textbook needs, and we're looking at delaying any purchases of any additional textbooks above and beyond those items that I mentioned. That would save us $360,000. When we look at other items, we had a variety of mid-year cuts, and again, that gets into that big picture piece that we've been talking about. We've been talking about the budget all the year. We've been anxious about our budget this year, anxious about our budget next year, anxious about our 2016-2017 budget. And so we actually implemented, with your approval, mid-year budget cuts. And so we will not be reinstating those as we move forward. And so there was a supervisory position in our maintenance department that we're not replacing. There was a paraprofessional that we had at Franklin High School that we will not be replacing, that we reduced in the middle of the year. We cut a central office communications position, specifically with our video and so on. We won't be replacing that position. And then we made some small security reductions at the secondary schools, if you remember, and those will remain as a cut for next school year. On top of that, we have some additional recommendations. We're looking at reorganizing right now our curriculum department, and right now we have 4 content individuals that are released from the class, and in looking at that particular setup for us under our instruction department, we're looking at consolidating those, actually providing some more responsibility for those positions, actually, especially as they're out working with our staffs. And so there'll be coordinator positions, but there'll only be 2. And so there'll be some cost savings there. Currently, we have a teacher that's released half-time to provide technology support to all of our schools, and that position will go away. And then we have historically had a supervisor to help, or a manager to help run our main auditorium at Churchill High School. And Churchill High School staff believe that there are ways for us to help us cover the activities that go on at the auditorium, and we reduce that position, and that individual is going to be retiring. And so those items come up with an additional $280,000. And so if you look at the program-related items that I mentioned, the textbook purchases delayed and the 2 teaching staff, along with the mid-year budget cuts being continued and the central office support that will be reduced, that's almost $1 million. Lisa, when she's looked at the tax refund budget for next year, believes that she can trim that by $100,000. And so all of those items add up to about $5.1 million. Over $4 million in cost-saving revenue enhancement items, and a little over $1 million in other support items. And we're pleased that the only program-related items are about $500,000 out of that $5.1 million of recommendations. That still leaves us spending more money than we have coming in, which means we'll be monitoring this very, very closely over the next year, just as we did this year. In addition, the fund balance of about $600,000 is much lower than we would like to see. But at this point in time, because of what happened with the state budget, we don't feel that we should bring any more reductions to you, at least at this point in time. Not that we may not in the summer, as we're sorting things out, bring some of the recommendations for your consideration. But at this point in time, we're comfortable moving ahead with the budget projections that we have here, and as we do every year, monitoring these very closely, starting with our enrollment projections as they come in the fall. So there's always a lot of unknowns at this particular point in time in the year, but we certainly are anxious about this budget because some of the one-time items in there, but we're feeling good about the programs that we've protected with this budget as we're moving forward. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions, specifically, any questions at all. The big issue for us is that if we're going to pass a budget, we're going to have to agree to these additional $1 million of reductions that we're recommending here that are above and beyond the $4 million of cost-saving revenue enhancement items that you've already given us direction on. So that's the thinking that we need as we're going to next week and wanting to pass a budget to be able to meet our obligation by the end of June. Thoughts, questions? Good, bad, and the ugly, right? We're excited about the programs we're saving, but it's a very precarious budget, to say the least.
Mr. Sanders.
Dr. Liepa, we're making an assumption on the cell tower agreement here. When will we know if that agreement's go or no go? Is it going to be for the school year, you think? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
I think we'll know by this summer.
Because that would put us
In deficit.
In deficit, right?
Correct.
So we would have to make some
Yeah,
pretty
we'd have to look
significant cuts.
at another area of fund balance that we have in another account, or we'd have to make some additional program cuts or other revenue enhancement things to implement during the year. So that's how precarious this budget is.
Yeah.
But I think the last we've heard, we're getting pretty close to having that worked out.
Okay. Thank you.
President Burton.
As you're talking, I'm kind of adding up here, we're talking about, as far as I can figure, about 21 more positions that we're cutting out of the district. Just so the public is aware, if my rough adding is correct here, if we're looking at a supervisor of maintenance, the parapro at Franklin, the communications person, I can't even put a number on secondary security because those are some partial positions, I believe. 2 central office individuals from the curriculum department, tech support,
Churchill High School
Churchill High
manager.
School auditorium manager, that's 7 right there. And then for our 300 students, I just threw an average of 25 students
Yeah.
per teacher.
Maybe the
So
ballpark
there's,
a little over 10.
there's 12 teachers
Right.
plus 2 more above and beyond our
That's correct.
so we're looking at
Neighborhood of
approximately, just a rough stab at 21 more positions that we've cut out of our school district in order to try to survive on budgets like this. So I would
Correct.
just like the public to know that we're taking this all very seriously and everyone's taking a hit on this. So, thank you.
Mrs. McDonald?
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Dr. Leopold and Ms. Abby, the increases in the property and casualty insurance, and was there any way to negotiate or reduce that figure, or have we gone out to?
Yeah, they actually
quote?
have a formula for that, in the
Okay.
way that they do that through the trust, and so, you know, and we don't know what those increases will be until towards the end of the year. But I can assure you that one of the high priority items on our list is to relook at that and see if there are other opportunities. So, if that happens, we would bring that forward to the board at the appropriate time. So it's on our radar for sure, absolutely.
Right. So that is actually an increase of that dollar amount.
Right.
Yes.
Over and
Yeah.
above what we already paid.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mrs. Jarvis,
Yes.
thank you. I'm sorry, I just want to mention too that you have the millage rates also in your package today, the taxable value and millage rates. And for those who are new and for those who are veterans, you'll recall that when we have a public hearing prior to our regular voting meeting on the budget where we discuss the millage rates and the taxable values 15 minutes prior to the board meeting. We have that published in the newspaper ahead of time. So we will get that on the agenda if we can. And at that time, as we, provide an opportunity, I will explain that at that time and provide an opportunity for public comment as we always do on that. So there's no action needed at that time slot for the Board of Education, but we do make that available for public comment. I would highlight that the taxable values have gone up a little bit under 1%. That's good news. And the millage rates that we are bringing forward have not changed. For our general fund, will be, again, 18 mills on non-homestead property. That means not on homes, so it's on businesses and commercial properties. 6 mills, on the commercial personal property. That will bring in approximately $23 million. But recall that that's just part of our state aid, so we still get a little over $8,000 per student. This doesn't add to that, that's just a piece of whatever we collect locally, the state does not pay us. So if it's 110 million, it's 110 minus this 23 million. So that is not above and beyond our foundation allowance. The debt retirement fund, the 4.6 mils that we are projecting is exactly what we had this year, and is also what we have projected for this school year, this next school year, when we put together our bond application and documents for the community. And then the sinking fund, again, no change at 1.12 mils. So again, no change from the current school year for next year's millage rates.
Thank you, Mrs. Abby.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you. Should we add that, the millage then onto the agenda?
The public hearing at 6:45. And then the regular budget approval will be part of the agenda at 7 o'clock if you
Okay.
agree.
All right, then we can move on to the cash flow borrowing.
Oh, I
sorry.
just have one more question.
Sorry.
We'll be getting the full budget in our packet Thursday?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be the resolutions. It won't be the full book, but it'll be all the resolutions.
So we won't have the whole book?
I don't know if I can get the whole book done this week. We're just getting it approved tonight. So I have my go forward, but I'll try and bring it on Monday at worst.
Okay, maybe you can email it?
If it's done.
Okay.
Remember that
book-
it's
the
really,
book-
the book is what you already have with all the changes that you see in the packet tonight, that's all it is. So,
So in essence,
So-
we have it, Dr. Leopold, we have the two pieces. We
you'll
the
have
book-
those things with all the things on these 2 pages and then added into it.
Yeah.
So what you wouldn't see this time would be the charts, that show you like the foundation allowance and some of those updates, or how much of our budget is revenue and expenditures. And we wouldn't have that line item, that very line item detail that's in the back. But we'll get that out to you as soon as we can. Because we don't have like major changes or some of those things that we bring on the amendments that are typically in the book. Some of those other detailed documents that show you the changes. Usually what we put in the adopted budget, or proposed budget, will be the adopted budget once you adopt it, shows the assumption pages. That's a little bit different. So you've got the information, just not in that format.
Okay.
The amendments is where you see the changes from one to another.
Okay.
All set? Then we can move on to the cash flow borrowing, again with Ms. Abby.
Okay, thank you very much. Not my favorite thing to bring to the board every year, or for the last several years anyways, and I'll ask Mr. Armelagus to come up and join us as well. As we have for the last several years, we are coming to ask the Board of Education for approval to move forward to do cash flow borrowing, meaning what that means is that there are certain times of the year where even though you've seen a balanced budget that we've proposed to you tonight for next year, due to several reasons, which I'll talk about in a second, there are times during the year where we have less cash in the bank than we have need to write checks for. Now, I know that's never happened to anybody else, less me. But I'll go over how we get our cash during the year so you have an understanding of how that works. Of course, our fiscal year starts July 1, and our school year, of course, starts in September. Well, we get our first check from the state of Michigan in October. So we've been in business since July 1, and we've had kids in school for well over a month, almost 2 months, and we get our first check. Now, we get 11 checks from the state of Michigan. We don't get 12. We get 11 checks. They start in October, and then they end the following August, when we've been out of school for several months. So we get 1/11 of our money each month, and we get that money once a month, and we get it either on the 20th, or if that happens to be a Friday, we get it on the next Monday. And that's important because paydays are on Friday, and sometimes those two things can conflict. And these checks are about $10 million. It is a significant part of how our cash gets into the district. So, well, it's the significant way in which cash gets into our district. So if those are conflicted, that can cause a cash flow problem for us from a payroll standpoint. It used to be the state of Michigan actually would give us that check on the Friday no matter what. So if it happened to be the 19th and Friday was the 20th, they'd pay us on that Friday. Well, now in order to improve their cash flow cycle, they've moved that off to the next business day. Another thing is, as we talked about earlier, we're going to collect about $23 million in property taxes for our general fund, again, part of our overall operating budget. That money generally comes in twice a year. As you know, as taxpayers, you know, your taxes are due in the winter and the summer. Well, that's how we get paid as well. It's not one lump sum check. It comes in over some weeks and months, but that generally just comes in at those times. So it's really a lot of ebbs and flows as it comes in with cash. When we had a larger fund balance, we had cash in the bank in order to cover some of those ebbs and flows. As we've dwindled down our fund balance, or which in our own homes would be our own savings account, someplace you could go out and pull a couple of dollars if you were short 1 month, that's exactly what's happened to the district as well. We don't have a place to turn to pull that money out when it ebbs and flows. So what we and many districts across the state do, I would say most at this point, as you've seen fund balances across the state decline, is we get what's called a state aid note. We estimate where we think we will have our low point during the year. We borrow enough money to cover that, and that helps us get through the cash flow. So I gave you the big explanation, and now Nick is going to explain where we are this year, where we've been in the past, kind of where we are, and how we go about borrowing that money and what our process is for doing that. So, Nick?
Hello, everyone. Good evening. And, well, last year we borrowed about $8.3 million, and for the first time, we did what they call a dual bid. We actually put in an application with the Michigan Finance Authority, which is through the state, and we also put out bids to local banks and national banks. We did have 2 bids come back from national banks, and they were both at a lower interest cost than through the state, so we decided to go with PNC Bank, and we borrowed $8.3 million at, I think the interest rate was about 0.75%. So I think the total interest cost was about $60,000 that we have to pay back on August of this year. Right now, I've put together a cash flow assumptions and also a cash flow statement through the following September, so September of 2016. And right now, I'm showing a deficit, the highest deficit around January, based on a lot of what Lisa just explained. It's in the middle of the month, and it usually occurs on a payroll week where we're going to get our state aid check the following week. So the deficit came in around about 5.7 million. So we can borrow up to that deficit plus an additional 5% of operational expenditures. I had a discussion with our council at Troon, and that would allow us to borrow an additional $7 million based on our estimated expenditures. So we're roughly predicting or asking to borrow between 5.5 million and 6.5 million this year. And we'll again do the dual bids and see where we're at with interest rates in July.
So we get that information in July from the state and from the bid, and then we make that, what we ask you is the authority to go ahead and make that decision based on the best available rates and what we think is the best business decision at that time. And we'll continue to kind of fine tune that number. We will make a specific request for an exact number. We just keep trying to, we want to make sure we had everything tonight bundled up before we, put a stamp on it. Want to make sure we had approval on the budget so that Nick can finalize those numbers in the cash flow statement, and then we'll let you know exactly what that, we'll have a resolution for you from Truin next week, and that will have those amounts in it.
Any questions or comments? Mrs. Bonnefield?
Is it true with the local or national banks, as it is with the state of Michigan, that we have to borrow the entire amount for the entire year, that we can't just utilize the money when we need it and return it when we don't, more like equity ebb and flow?
With the banks, we would borrow the amount and then pay back the full amount plus interest on the due date, so next August. With Michigan Finance Authority, since we did not borrow with them last year, we would, if we did decide that they were the lower interest cost, we would be forced to pay back in installments 50% of what we borrow. So that would reduce the interest costs, on an annual basis, but we'd still have to compare who's the lower cost between the banks and the state.
The line of, we've talked about a line of credit or an equity sort of thing in the past, and what the the advice we've gotten as far as it ends up costing you more, because every time you go back, if you have to go back to that line of credit, you gotta go back with legal costs, like they have to initiate it for you. It's not like you would just sign a note and like kind of draw down on it, sort of thing, so, yeah, if it ever, we keep asking, but if we ever find a way to do that cheaper, we would, because sometimes it is just a couple of times a year that you have that, cash flow issue, so.
Okay,
And we would have to get approval from you every time we borrow.
okay,
So legal opinion and approval from you.
got it.
Any other questions? President Burton?
How long has it been? It seems like it's been back 4 or 5 years when the state moved our payments to beginning in October, or is it longer ago?
Oh,
than
longer
that?
ago than that, in October.
Okay,
I think as long as, at least 10 years.
okay. It is just extremely frustrating that the state is forcing us into this position.
Yeah.
By, out of convenience for their budget, they are not paying us for 3 months after our fiscal year begins. And it's not like we decide when our fiscal year begins. It is set.
Right.
And yet the state chooses to not pay us because they need the money more than we do. That's just beyond irritating. And it's costing us a lot of money. All right, thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. Nick, it sounds like the amount that you're requesting this year is lower than last year,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
By $1 million or $2?
From 8.3 million to, if we go 6.5, so a little under 2 million.
Okay, all right, thanks.
We keep working it.
Thank you for looking at it.
Mr. Simmons?
Yeah, I just, since Mr. Roulier is no longer on the board, I know this is his issue that he got really fired up about, so I feel like I need to carry this torch. They are essentially costing us one classroom teacher, $60,000. Equivalent of 5 classes at our secondary level we could offer that we won't, because Lansing won't make the adjustments with cash flow. And this happens throughout the state.
I know.
It is egregious and outrageous, and we we have to address it every year because it's silly that they can't find a solution for this. But thank you for your hard work in finding the best deal for us.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions, comments?
Nick is also our point person on the cell tower, so Nick, was that pretty close on the, sort of the timeline on that, or?
Yeah, obviously legal counsel's still looking at it. I will follow up with them this week to see where we're at.
Their legal counsel, the cell tower people,
Ye-
or the buyers,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Our legal counsel's looked at it, they've given it to the buyer.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, then we can move on to the next item, the review of,
We are gonna approve to put this on the
Oh.
budget, or the agenda for next week.
yes,
On the regular agenda?
Yes,
yes, thank you.
don't go anywhere.
Might as well make yourself comfortable. Review of upcoming bus purchases from the 2013 bond. And Ms. Abby, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're very excited to come and talk about buses tonight. It's not as exciting as band equipment, I get it, but still, it is to the transportation
Yeah,
people.
depends who you talk to.
It really is. There's two things we want to talk about tonight. One is just kind of where we are with the bus purchases and what our plans are. And then two years ago, when we purchased our first set of 20 buses, we had talked about alternate fuels. It didn't make sense at that time, but the board asked us to come back in our next bus purchase and look at that again, analyze that again. So we've done that, which is why we're a little bit behind in this bus purchase. This is really taking a little bit more time than we thought it would, but definitely worth the effort. And so that'll be the second part of our discussion, is deciding, do we want to look at an alternate fuel source bus, or do we want to continue with diesel and gas buses, which is what we have today? So the first document you have is the budget and planned purchase cycle in your board packet tonight, and this is just me doing a lot of spreadsheet work. So we had planned on, we have 61 bus replacements in our planning for the bond issue. And we plan to purchase those in three phases, 2013, 15, and 17. So on the left side, you see what we've brought to the Board of Education in terms of the types of buses, the quantity, and the estimated cost that would be over those three cycles. So that's the column called budget. And so if you go down to the bottom, you can see we plan to purchase 61 buses at a total cost of $4,796,000. So if you look at phase 1, 2013, on the actual side, the far right side, you can see we purchased 20 buses. We had planned on that being about 1.6 million. That one actually came in a little bit better, a little under 1.5 million. So we actually had savings from that purchase of $104,000. So now we're on to our next bus purchase. And we're not talking about alternate fuel buses right now, we're just talking about regular diesel buses. If you look at those costs, they're actually up a little bit. We had budgeted a little under 1.6 million, it's just a little bit over 1.6 million for that purchase. And then if you go down to the last one, and again, we're estimating, and remind me, Nick, I think we used about a 3 to 5% increase. I can't remember exactly what percentage we used, but a slight increase again for 2017. Purchasing those 21 buses, a little over budget of $66,000, but all good news, we end up $11 under budget when it's all said and done. So as we planned it, we can purchase, assuming prices don't go up any more than we think, or not significantly more, the 61 buses. You might see that there's kind of a swing between the wheelchair lift and the special education minibuses. We actually have a higher need for the wheelchair lift buses than the minibuses. So as we get that information from our transportation department where our greatest needs are, we will make those adjustments and recommendations to the board. So that's where we are right now. So with that said, we would like to go forward with go out for a bid and then bring a recommendation to you for 20 buses. But before we do that, to know what kind of buses we're going to bid, we'd like to look at the analysis, which is the next sheet in your packet, the bus fuel comparison, so the 3 vertical columns this time that we'd like to look at. And Nick is going to go through the details on what we looked at and what we're thinking about right now.
First, I'd just like to bring to your attention that this comparison right here doesn't include the minibuses, and based on a recommendation from Todd Dixon, who's our bus maintenance or our bus garage supervisor, he would like to continue to purchase gasoline powered minibuses, just because they are, they're cheaper obviously than propane, and he's gotten no data from talking with other districts and the sales rep manufacturers on any other districts purchasing the mini propane power buses to do any cost comparisons or any recommendations to kind of justify that additional cost. So I just wanted to point that out before we go into detail on this spreadsheet right here. That being said, we have reviewed the differences in the benefits and costs between diesel, propane, and natural gas fuel sources for the conventional 77-passenger and the 71-passenger wheelchair lift buses. And if you take a look at the second spreadsheet, or the one that we're looking at right now, this comparison is based on 29 conventional wheelchair buses left to replace in the remaining two phases, and historical data for diesel costs and consumptions and estimates for propane and natural gas. So first, let's go over the natural gas option, which is listed in the far right column. As you can see, we estimated additional cost to purchase these buses to be approximately $28,000 per bus, or based on 29 buses, a total cost of $812,000. Also, the current cost of natural gas per gallon is much higher than either diesel or propane. As you can see right there, we're currently getting a price of $2.59, and that's right from the station right down the street on Farmington, Consumers Energy, a natural gas station.
Sorry, one quick question. Is the mileage per gallon comparable?
For the
Natural gas
yes.
opposed to- okay.
With propane, not to diesel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed
It's
that.
right on there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we've adjusted that quantity gallons per bus to reflect that difference.
Yes. So you're definitely over, the diesel is definitely getting more per miles per gallon than both propane and natural gas. And that's just based on our historical data and then just kind of estimates of what we've gotten from other districts and from the manufacturing sales reps.
4 miles per gallon. Let's go electric. Okay, did I say that, Lisa? I'm sorry.
No, we don't have enough places to charge. So you can see with the natural gas, not only would we have an increase of $800,000 in bus costs alone, above and beyond what I showed you on that previous page, but we'd also be losing money based on, just in our general fund operating of a little over $100,000 a year, so because that's a negative fuel savings there, so.
Check that.
We can check that one off.
Yes, that's what I was
They
just
do
gonna say.
burn.
It does burn clean,
They
though.
burn cleaner,
Nice.
so we wanted to bring that
That's
to your
great.
attention, and there are places going that way, but I don't think we're quite there yet, so. If we can, we would like to just check that one off for this time.
Yeah, plus we'd have to have all the buses go down to obviously the station down the street, and that would cause a little bit of logistical, and it's very highly expensive to put in infrastructure for natural gas. So propane, if the district invested in it, and that's obviously in the middle column, if the district invested in a propane tank directly at an estimated cost of $40,000 to purchase and install, propane gas would currently cost 92 cents per gallon, and we estimated total fuel savings of approximately $56,000 per year. If we rented a propane tank, the cost of rent would be added to the price per gallon of propane, and that would currently cost us about $1.12. With this option, we estimated fuel savings of approximately $36,000 per year. But the big downside to propane is there would be an additional cost of approximately $8,500 on average, and for a total additional cost over the same amount of diesel buses of approximately $244,000. Therefore, if we purchase propane buses and we don't increase the bond budget for this equipment, it would entail we purchase 3 fewer conventional, 3 fewer wheelchair, or 5 fewer special education minibuses. So if there's any questions, I didn't.
So again, same thing, would be $244,000 above what we saw on the previous page, so.
Mr. Johnson?
That's just for the additional cost per bus. If
Right.
you add on the cost to purchase the tank, that takes it from $244 to $284.
Right.
Correct.
And you would have an annual fuel savings of $55,000, so amortizing it would take us 5 to 6 years
Yeah.
to recover that
Right.
cost.
Correct.
Yeah, I'll remind you that this is the general fund versus another fund, but
Yeah, I mean, the big
Assuming we-
issue for us was the 245 is, that means we're gonna be able to buy less buses in the bond issue.
Right.
Right.
That was the
I think the
big
biggest,
piece.
for us, but that was
So-
the discussion.
So it's 3 less buses that we can buy versus saving $50,000 or $36,000 in the general fund. That's really the decision. And the recommendation is that we made a commitment to buy 61 buses. We'd like to be able to stick on that if we can. And that wouldn't be above $36,000 in the general fund.
Yeah, there are some other, it's not that you can't overcome it, but there are some other issues. We have 2 fueling sources out there. We have a propane tank, whether we rented it or purchased it, plus, of course, our diesel as well as our gasoline. So we'd have another fuel that, I know it doesn't sound like it, but really every single one of our bus drivers would have to be trained on how to handle propane versus gas and diesel, because they have a different set of standards and rules and, what you do when you walk up to the pump and all those kinds of things. So there are definitely some additional time elements for our staff as well. And again, then we'd be servicing another type of bus, so we have to have different parts and different training for our mechanics and whatnot. So those aren't, not that we can't overcome those things, but those are things that we would have, 29 buses would be different in our fleet than the rest. So not something we can't come over, but again, it's something to think about. And again, as Dr. Leopold said, it would be at least 3 fewer buses at this point.
Any additional questions or comments? Mr. Centers?
Just our need for buses, we factored in the declining enrollment into those projections, correct?
Yes. We need
Yeah.
more than 61 buses.
Okay, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, unfortunately, when you lose 300 students over the district, instead of having 58 kids on a run, you have 55.
Yeah.
Still have a run.
Yeah,
We're all on the
still got to
same
run.
bus.
Yeah, not able to, we haven't been able to reduce really any runs.
Yeah, and I would say, again, more importantly, is this 61 is probably, we have over 100 buses, and 110, I think, was spares, so, we're significantly years behind where we should have been to begin with, even with this, so. And this is over 6 years, so, some of those that we purchased will be 6 years old by the time we get to the end of the purchase, so. Not to mention when we put the plan together in 2012, 2013.
With this round of purchases, we would finally be getting rid of our buses that are from 1999 in our fleet. And we would probably still keep a few of them for spares, but, so that's 16 years.
I got a Ford Focus that's a 99 sitting in the driveway.
Sitting in the driveway.
Yeah.
Keywords.
It's not running.
Other questions and comments? Mrs. Bonnefield?
Is there, and again, I know this is all speculation, but is there any information out there on the trend costs in the future of the difference between diesel and propane based on projected demands for the different fuels that, is diesel projected to go up significantly or come down, and the same thing with propane depending on the demand, or are there really not that?
I don't hear significant things. I mean, I think there's an expectation that propane is going to continue to provide more opportunities for savings, but what that's going to look like compared to diesel, I don't know. I mean, that is a growing trend. You do hear about that more. It is supposed to be more of a savings, but it's kind of like, getting into some of the different lightings, the LEDs and that. You got to find that magic point where it makes sense to make that investment for the savings. And I don't know if we're here there with this or not.
President Burton?
For me, the difference is, we made a commitment to the community that we were going to, with that bond money, we would be purchasing 61 buses. And that is very significant to me. I want to make sure that we hold true to that commitment. And therefore, I want to go ahead and go with diesel.
Any others? Mr. Johnson?
Is there value in the buses that we would be getting rid of?
Of course. We always do a trade-in when we can.
Of course.
Of course.
Okay.
But we haven't salvaged or, tried to get parts out of or whatever, then, yeah, we always do a trade-in if we can. And if not, we try and sell them on auction and,
Okay, and that's all built into our
Yeah.
numbers.
depending on what we purchase them with. If we purchase them with general fund monies, and we can return any, like if it's an auction, we can return that to the general fund.
Thanks.
Questions, comments?
what we would need then direction is to go ahead and go out for bids on diesel buses.
And nothing to vote on next week,
No,
just
nothing to
a
vote on next
question of
week.
whether you're okay with,
Diesel.
with the diesel, and then we'll go and get the bids.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We're done for now.
Okay, and item D is the recommendation to purchase servers and storage from the 2013 bond. And that would be Ms. Alice.
Here comes the team.
Gang's all here.
Yes, they're all here.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are bringing to you two technology-related recommendations for purchase. The first recommendation is to purchase servers and storage using funds from the 2013 bond. This recommendation was first presented to the Board of Education in March. You may remember at that time that the board approved entering into a contract with Sentinel Technologies Incorporated for them to design an integrated information technology data server and storage solution for our district.
Yeah, exactly.
At that time, the board also approved the recommendation to purchase the requisite hardware from Sentinel, and that would have been based on an education list price discount. And that would be, that requisite hardware would be based on the server and data storage solution that Sentinel had designed for our district. So the recommendation that we're bringing to you tonight is from Sentinel, and it is to purchase servers, storage, licensing, and a secondary data recovery system. And these are all the pieces that were designed in the solution that they created for us. So in your packet, you have the quote from Sentinel. The cost of the items that I just described to you totals $974,750. We are recommending a 10% contingency of $97,475, which brings the total for this purchase to $1,072,225. The savings on the server and storage allows us to increase the original contingency from 6% to 10%, and for such high-ticket items, such as the ones that we're recommending tonight, that contingency can be quickly absorbed. So we recommend going from a 6% contingency to a 10% contingency. The recommendation for this purchase is within the budget, the 2013 budget, and the total amount actually came in under budget. The original budgeted amount was $1,372,700. This purchase then allows us to see a $248,421 savings. Again, this purchase is within the 2013 bond, and I have joining me tonight representatives from our IT department, Tim Clan, Steve Mazzadre, and from Barton Mallow, I have Rob Greger, who is here with us, and we are all here to answer any of the questions that you might have.
Any questions for our panel?
Yes.
So why are we buying this stuff again? What does this stuff do? I know it's going down there somewhere, right?
Yes. Some of it would be obviously in our head-end room that we have here in this building. Part of it, the disaster recovery side of it, would be at another building, most likely one of the high schools in their head end. Is that correct, Steve? We hadn't really chosen one in particular.
Most likely Franklin, because it's the farthest away geographically, and there are benefits to having your disaster recovery site as far away as possible from your main site. In terms of what does this equipment do, it stores all student work, projects, teachers' work, projects, lesson plans, applications to help kids with learning, math, Pretty much.
Anything that goes in the computer.
Anything that goes in the computer.
Is stored on
That
this.
happens on the computer, printing, faxing. Safety
Any
and-
type of data
Safety and
storage.
security, any kind of
Yeah.
computerized.
So it would include the security system, cameras,
The new cameras.
phone systems, everything that has any
Any kind of
tie at
data.
all with our network and the servers. It's all gonna be in that same system.
And a majority of the equipment that we were replacing is 8 years old, some older, some a little bit newer, not much a little bit newer. So, much needed. I was very happy to see the numbers come in where they did.
Mr. Sanders?
You know, it's hard to predict, but how long will this new infrastructure stay relevant? And I know that you never can predict what's going to come next with technology, but just another 8 years, is that pretty, you know,
Well,
a good estimate?
I would say that about 10 years would probably be a good estimate. I mean, we've gotten 14 years out of our current phone system. Our newest servers are pretty much all 8 years old. We have, I think, 3 servers that are newer, but they're all from 2010, so they're 5 years old. I definitely think that this solution we can get to last at least 10 years. But probably in 10 years, we'll be in the same situation that we're in today, where we're gonna start itching for something. Now, hopefully it won't be a replacement of this scale at that time. This is the first time we've done a replacement of this scale, I think, since the '92 bond. And those dollars stretched all the way until the 2013 bond, so.
And I think you'd see, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong as well too, that in the business world, you're probably looking at about half that. You know, typically, they're more 3 to 5 years, and this type of stuff would be getting replaced, whereas we get, you know, every bit of use out of our equipment that we can for as long as we can, so.
Yep. And we buy a little bit of better stuff so that it lasts a little bit longer. I mean, there's cheaper stuff available, but it's not gonna last 10 years. And knowing, knowing that our next bond is probably 20 years in the future, on average, give or take, that's really where we need to be to make it last and make it work.
There is some scalability built into this as well.
We can expand and make it larger, we can expand and make it faster to an extent, and the parts and pieces will be available for the next several years. And there's always the used market after that, to keep building on this.
Mr. Johnson?
Tim, is this primarily data storage?
It's, well, I mean.
Or is it operating system as well?
That is part of the solution is the storage, but it's the servers that, house the storage and run the phone systems and run the security systems and save everything we run in the district now, it seems, is tied into the servers in some way, shape, or form, whether it's software that we're running on those servers or storage space that we're using on those servers.
It's also the processing power.
Okay, and I'm assuming the TB is the terabyte on here. In terms of space itself, I'm assuming this is going to be adequate for hopefully up to 10 years. Keep our fingers crossed.
That's what we're hoping based on current, growth trends and how things are going. Right now, we're using about 20 terabytes. The solution includes, I think, 49 terabytes.
49, right.
So, we're planning on at least doubling what we have, and there are also new technologies we've implemented, such as disk deduplication, where if 2 people have a copy of the exact same file, it only stores 1 copy, which saves on your storage. So technologies like that have actually really helped save us in the last two years, whereas, our staff server was 6 terabytes, and it's still 6 terabytes, but it's actually only 3 now, because 50% of the data appears in more than one place.
Okay.
So given those assumptions and our growth pattern over the last 10 years, and I've been here for 11, this is predicted to be
This is adequate.
And it is expandable, and you can buy a shelf of drives for about $20,000 and expand it up.
Okay.
And I think that's an additional 6 to 8 terabytes at a time of high-speed disk for $20,000. These aren't the drives that you buy at Best Buy where you get a 6 terabyte drive for $200 or $149. But the same thing applies. You can keep adding, and we'll have several available shelves to add more disk or storage if we do need it. But won't be coming back for $1 million, it'll be coming for $20,000.
Okay,
So,
all right, sounds good, thank you.
Other questions, comments? I have one. You mentioned licensing. What kind of licensing and how long would that be good for?
So all of these items require licensing, so you get 5 years included with the purchase, and then year 6, we'll need to fund the continuing software licenses out of the, usually it would be the B4 fund or the software fund. Those are funds that are part of the IT department.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Can we add this onto the agenda?
Regular agenda?
Yes,
Definitely, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You have one more?
You're next.
Can't leave yet.
Go yet.
Don't go
Yeah.
anywhere, right.
Yeah.
Recommendation to purchase replacement of internet content filtering.
Yes, our second technology-related recommendation tonight is to purchase internet content filtering system, and that is to replace our existing system. We currently provide internet content filtering on all computing devices that are connected within our district. The main purpose of the content filtering system is to block inappropriate content, such as pornography, as well as to mitigate threats such as malware and viruses. The district is required to have an internet filtering system in order to receive federal E-rate funds. For the past 8 years, LPS, as well as most of the school districts in Wayne County, have been using a content filtering system called 8E6, which was purchased through the Wayne RISA Consortium. As of August 1st, 2015, that contract is expiring. So Wayne RISA, along with the state of Michigan, worked together to write a bid for a new filtering system, and 2 solutions were accepted. One is called iBoss, and the other one is called Lightspeed. After a thorough evaluation of both of these products, a majority of Wayne County school districts, including LPS, recommended that iBoss was the best solution, and they're recommending a 3-year contract across Wayne County. So in order to move forward with this recommendation, there are some purchases that we're going to need to make. One is to purchase new filtering hardware as well as software licenses. So in your packet, you do have a quote from iBoss. The filtering hardware that we need total $17,894, and this is a one-time cost. In addition, we're recommending a 3-year hardware replacement warranty, and that's for a cost of $1,995. The filtering licenses is based on a per pupil fee of approximately 47 cents per student. Using a student enrollment number of 14,901 students, the 3-year cost for the licenses is $20,861.40. The filtering hardware, the 3-year hardware replacement warranty, and the 3-year software subscription, including shipping and handling, totals. The total amount is on the next page, which is $40,910.30. The pricing does reflect a 6% discount if the purchase order can be placed before the end of the month. And the funds for this purchase will come from the IT general funds. Again, joining me this evening are the panel of gentlemen who are here to respond to any questions that you might have.
Any questions? President Burton.
I noticed in the written information, and you mentioned it also, you said across Wayne County. Is this a county-wide agreement, or, is the entire county having to go on in this together, or is this a district-by-district decision?
It's a district-by-district decision, but using 2 solutions, Lightspeed and iBoss. The majority of districts in the county are going with iBoss because they believe that's the best solution for Wayne County. And we Tim can speak to this, but he was involved in evaluating the programs, and the best solution that he believed was
Actually, Steve.
Steve was involved in evaluating these programs, and his recommendation was to go with iBoss.
Okay. Again, when you say it's the best for Wayne County, is that because of the computer programs and so forth that we have through RISA? Is that why Wayne County? I mean, what I'm getting at is, where's the
Sure.
Wayne County come into the
All right,
equation?
so this, we did a statewide bid. It started out as a countywide bid, as we had done for the last 8 years. And we decided to join with the state with the spot trig bid to try to see if we could get even better pricing based on getting even more students, filtered. And so the state accepted 2 solutions, Lightspeed and iBoss. There are some districts, I believe Heartland is one that has Lightspeed, so they'll be staying with Lightspeed. But there were some other districts like Allen Park that have iBoss and would be staying with iBoss. Now, the rest of us who have neither had a choice to make. But I was on the committee with all of the Wayne County districts, and Wyandotte and Northville and Livonia and several others evaluated both products, and we felt that iBoss was the best fit for our environments. Now, we're not forced to pick either. We could go off on our own. In fact, I looked up a renewal for our current product just to see where it would fall, and it was about $19,000 a year. Times 3 years, that's significantly more than we're being offered. And so some of the reasons why we like the iBoss is it has the ability to filter iPads when they leave the district. So if we ever decide that we're going to let students check them out and take them home, we haven't talked about that, but if we want to do that, this gives us that option, whereas some of the other products do not. Same thing with Chromebooks and laptops and other things, as well as meeting all of the needs that our current filter already met. And it also is compatible with all of the network infrastructure that we have. It works the way we expected it to work, and we're satisfied with it. And Lightspeed met most of the criteria, and honestly, had more people been on board with that, in the county, we could have made that solution work too. But the Lightspeed solution, they were both 50 cents per student for the licensing cost. The Lightspeed hardware, I believe, was a little bit higher. That's not why we picked them, but had a little bit of bearings in the decision. And I know that we're making the right decision with the iBoss.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Johnson?
You said that this is a filtering. Did you also talk about the other way? It filters.
We have a firewall to protect bad things from coming in.
Okay,
That's what you're
your
referring
spam,
to.
yeah.
And that's a separate product.
Okay, this doesn't do any of that for us.
This connects between our district core and the firewall, and then the firewall goes out to the internet.
Okay.
So it is a similar but
Separate
piece.
Okay. All right, thanks.
You can kind of picture the firewall as protecting us from somebody hacking in for the most part.
Right.
Whereas the filter checks everything coming through and blocks some of the things that are inappropriate.
The firewall is the final border between us and the outside, and the filter looks at things that are on their way to the border and stops them before they even get to the border to go out. So if you were trying to look up a bad website, the filter catches it before it even gets to the firewall, so it never even goes out the door.
On the way out.
On the way
As
out.
opposed to on the way in.
It doesn't look at
Exactly.
anything on the way in. The
Yeah.
firewall looks at everything.
The firewall
on the way
takes
out.
care of that, and we've got all the programming that stops all that nasty little malware and spyware and everything else that comes in.
We hope, yes.
And we
We
hope.
hope.
Yeah, we hope. Okay, now I'm clear.
Any other questions or comments? Then let's add this to the agenda as well.
Regular agenda?
Regular agenda.
Excellent, thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And like,
And now we'll look at the potential agreement with Total Soccer, and we'll welcome back Miss Abby.
And I'll go ahead and start while Lisa's running up here. The cooperative agreement that we have is one that we talked about on multiple occasions. The last time that I met with you, I shared with you the specifics of it, and the question was, would we be ready by June 22nd to have a finalized agreement? And we do. I'm sending around a draft of what we think will be the final language, and you can review that at your leisure. Just to highlight what's in the cooperative agreement, and it's with Total Soccer from Wixom. And so if you've ever been to Wixom to a soccer game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They have the premier indoor soccer facility, but they also manage a variety of other soccer facilities across metropolitan Detroit. They manage the Eastern Michigan facility. If you've ever been in that one, it's beautiful. They manage the South Lyon outside facilities. They manage the Oakland University facility. And so they have a great deal of experience and expertise in regards to managing soccer facilities, both internal and external, or inside and outside, I should say, facilities. And so we're pleased to be able to work with them because we feel they're going to have the best ability to be able to generate revenue that will allow us to utilize the facilities after school and be able to generate some dollars from that. So the recommendation is that we enter into this cooperative agreement. It's called a cooperative agreement because actually we'll still be able to use the facility for school purposes Monday through Friday from 6 o'clock till 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then also any other time that we agree to with Total Soccer, we'll be able to use it for our school activities. And so that's a significant portion of the agreement that we have. As it relates to the term of the lease, we're looking at a 5-year term, and then we're looking at potentially 5 additional 3-year extensions. And as it relates to that, we have no worry in regards to if we have a potential future use for the site that we didn't anticipate, because we do have a termination clause in there with a 4-month notice. We do have a small, what I would consider a small one-time fee of $20,000 if we were to walk out of the deal with Total Soccer at any point in time, because obviously they're going to be making an investment in monitoring the property by purchasing goals, et cetera. And so we thought that was the fair thing to do. Also, if we find that, as you know, we've had different organizations in the past that have wanted to build an indoor facility on that particular site. None of them have panned out to date. But if there was someone that came forward with an indoor soccer facility, that they would have the right of first refusal. In other words, if someone came and said they would build this and they would pay us so much money to do that, they would have the opportunity to do the same thing. And we're 100% fine with that particular agreement. As I mentioned to you a few weeks ago, the revenue that we'll generate in year 1, we want to give them some time to get the program up and running. And so we're agreeing to 50% of their user fees that they generate in year 1, or rental fees for the property. And that will get them time with 2 seasons, both the fall and the spring, to set a clientele up over there that hopefully will work out for all of us in the future. Then we'd have a set fee of $35,000 of revenue per year. And again, this is just outside fields, so that's a good chunk of money that we're feeling good about to be able to generate on excess property. And then after the first 5 years, we would have an inflationary increase if the extensions go through for every year thereafter. There's limited in regards to what they can use it for. It can only be used for an outdoor athletic complex. They can't use it to, whatever would not be an outdoor athletic complex. Think of something here. They can't.
Have a carnival.
Yeah, there you go. Good. Look at that. A lot of great ideas.
What kind of revenue
Yes.
enhancing ideas?
Exactly. So they can't do that. The agreement has the normal liability insurance provisions, assignment provisions, subletting. They have to let us know if they sublet it out. Any default provisions. They're all typical type of language that we would typically have Clark Hill put into any of our agreements. The maintenance is clarified. I think I mentioned this to you last time also, that we will maintain the fields. One of the things they were anxious about when we initially talked to them was the fact that we have this due care plan, because it's a former environmental site, and so we have these certain due care things, which aren't really a big deal. You got to make sure that the vents are cleaned and the air filters around the facility. We have to make sure that we haven't punctured so far deep that we've somehow got into the ground where there's that demarcation layer before we put the cap on it. Those will be our responsibilities, which are very easy to do. So we'll maintain the property, cut the lawn, etc. And by doing that, we actually negotiated a higher rental price on an annual basis for them, but they didn't want to have to deal with that. They were anxious about that. We've had the property for a lot of years and don't feel the same anxiety, so that was fine. That was a trade-off for us. They will, though, line the fields, maintain the goals, all the kind of stuff to do the day-to-day operations over there. And again, we have a provision in there, and it says nothing more than if they want to put a dome on the facility at some point in time, that we agree to meet and talk to them about it. That's the only commitment that we're making there. So those are the highlights of the agreement, and we're pleased to actually have something over there for the community that we think will be a positive reuse of that site, at least 15 acres of that site. And with the economy turning around, who knows, maybe there'll be something on the other 20 acres or so that we have in the back.
All right, are there any other questions? President Burton?
Dr. Leopold, you mentioned indoor facility and you mentioned dome. For this purpose, are they considered one and the same, or when we talk about indoor facility, are we talking about a building structure?
It could be either.
Either one,
Mhm.
okay. Either one, they would have the right of first refusal, and
Yep.
we'll talk about it.
Exactly. Yep.
Thank you.
Could be either.
Any other questions or comments? Mrs.
I do.
McDonald?
Dr. Leopold, whatever came about of that lease that we had from the was it a basketball club?
Yeah, they actually, it wasn't a lease. They had put together a option to purchase a portion of the Cooper property to put an indoor basketball facility there. And so they ended up in the category of something that they tried to come up with, but it did not work out.
Okay.
So we did have an agreement with them that they would be able to utilize a portion of that site for that particular facility, but they were never able to get the funding for it. So the option expired.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions, comments? Well, in that case, pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I think we can add it to our regular agenda.
Yep.
And as long as we have you here, we can move to our next item, which is the potential agreement with Livonia Soccer.
Yes, and I'll have Lisa cover the details of the agreement that we currently have with them, but basically the soccer club, the Livonia City Soccer Club is very, very pleased with the current arrangement that we have with them, which is to utilize the gym space and a little bit of office space inside of the old Taylor Elementary School, all of the outside space at both Dickinson and Taylor for their soccer activities, and they also utilize, we had an agreement that we set up with them last time to utilize our high school fields when they're not being utilized, our high school multi-purpose fields, when they're not utilized, we're renting that property to them too, on the weekends primarily. And so what they would like to do is extend the lease. It doesn't actually expire this year, it actually expires next year. But things have been going so well that they're just anxious to get in and continue a positive relationship. And from my experience, especially in the last 9 months, has been a very positive relationship with them. They have gone out of their way to be very, very good tenants. And they've made an investment in those fields too. They put dirt down there and grown grass and done some other things. And so it's been a positive thing for us. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't want to do it, subject to us having some conversation with our high schools about the fields and see how that particular arrangement has worked. And if there are any changes to be made with that, we may delay this for a little bit, but if not, then we'd be prepared to bring a recommendation forward. So Lisa, you can cover the specifics.
Thanks. Randy gave you the big picture, so we're room or two at Taylor, as well as the fields outside there, and then the high school turf. And for the Taylor and Dickinson fields and the space inside of Taylor, the lease revenue is $40,000 a year, and then $8,000 for the high school field, separate from that. So a total of $48,000 of revenue each year. Again, like most of our leases, that's subject to an increase based on the consumer price index. And we have an option to terminate with a 90-day notice, so we feel pretty good about that. As Randy said, especially in the last 9 months or so, they've been very good neighbors with Nijiro at Taylor, so we feel very good about that. They've really gotten to know each other and work well together over there, so that's worked out. And specifically to the turf, again, we just reached out to our ADs to make sure that that's working the way we had intended, so we'll get some feedback from them as well. Right now, what we provide is that they can use up to one field each Saturday and Sunday for up to 8 hours. for 9 weeks in the spring and 9 weeks in the fall. So it's not every weekend all year long, but we do kind of want to take a look at that and see if that's, meeting our needs, specifically if, LPS is getting everything they need out of the fields first, and then making sure that we don't have maintenance issues or whatever else based on that. So we'll get back with you on that, and let you know how that looks. So other than that, we would like to, if it's a good working relationship, then we think it's a good idea to extend it. And it's nice revenue for the district, for fields that they're maintaining pretty well. Looks nice out there. And very busy out there if you go by during soccer season.
Again, we do have an option to terminate if we needed to, so
Yes.
that's part and parcel.
President Burton.
The gym during the day, is that available for Niji Iro? I don't
Yes.
remember.
Mhm.
Okay, so they're really both using it,
Right,
Yep.
one group in the daytime, one at night?
right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Johnson?
Two, how long is our present agreement?
Through next year, through 16.
How long was it?
Oh, it was 4 years. I think we started in the middle of a year through 2010, and then that extended to 13, and then through 16.
Okay, so they're looking to extend early.
Correct.
Yeah, they want to go
for
to
another-
19.
Right, they wanna
Go
go to
through to 19, okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Are you hoping for a vote on this?
Yes, if we can just work
Yeah.
through those issues, we'll let you know right away if we.
Okay.
Yeah, if we can, I'll just put in the update that we need to wait till July. If we feel we have a couple things we need to work out in regards to the use of the high school fields. If not, if we're feeling okay, then we'll bring it on Monday.
Okay, so pending that information, let's put it on the regular
Yeah, because it's just a
agenda.
rollover. Yeah, so we'll put it on for now, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Thank you very much. President Burton, that is the Finance Committee report.
It was a busy evening for finance tonight. The next item on our agenda is our curriculum committee. And frankly, even before we jump off finance, there were several things on here, and including this $48,000 for the soccer field, that I commend our administration for going out and being very creative. $48,000 is no small amount of money. That's, that pays for good chunks of salaries and so forth to keep teachers in front of our kids. So thank you to our administrative team for consistently, aggressively looking for ways to make additional money for our district.
And not just that, I would add that it's good for the neighborhood in both cases. I mean, we're using the Taylor area, so that's a positive. It's not vacant. And we're making good friends with a very large community organization with thousands of families that are active and involved. And so I think that's a positive for the school district. And it will be the same down eventually with the property across from Cooper, for our kids to be able to use that property again when we need it, and then for the neighborhood to see not this fenced up, old reminder of a landfill, that we've got it back to positive use. I think we're being good community neighbors in both.
Yeah. Alrighty, next item on our agenda is the curriculum committee, and Mrs. Laura.
Thank you, President Burton. We have 3 items on the agenda for the curriculum committee today. And the first is a cooperative agreements for the Livonia Career Technical Center. Mr. Archibald, good evening.
Good evening. Nice to see everyone this evening. You will recall that several weeks ago, we approved cooperative agreements with several area districts for students to utilize, or from those districts to utilize seats available at the Livonia Career Technical Center. Just a couple weeks ago, I was contacted by a person who works with the 2 charter schools in the area with interest in pursuing cooperative agreements, and so that's why I'm here this evening. The districts or schools are the Canton Preparatory High School that's located in Canton, and the Arbor Preparatory High School that's located in Ypsilanti. And again, as you know, these agreements allow students from these schools to attend the Career Technical Center as space permits. Our LPS students have had the first opportunity for seats available in our classes. The resident charter district receives the state aid for these students and is invoiced accordingly each semester for the amount equivalent to the fractional FTE that the students from the chartered schools, in this case, are enrolled at the Career Center. Special education services and transportation are the responsibility of the resident district. And again, based on my communications, with the person associated with these two groups, and my conversations with Mr. Anderson in terms of there are still a couple seats available at the Career Center, I'd recommend that we enter into these agreements. I believe you did receive a copy, and again, it's a standard form that we have been following, but I'll also entertain any questions you might have.
Questions or comments?
I have one question.
Mrs. McDonald?
Thank you, Mrs. Laura. The Arbor Preparatory High School, are they logistically going to be able to get their kids here?
That will be, well, since the transportation is their responsibility,
Right.
I would leave it to them to make that determination on whether they can or not.
Right.
And, you know, I don't know that, you know, we've had students from Dearborn Heights before, which is probably a similar distance to their location, but again, I would leave that to them. And if it's not working out, that's something we could address in the future.
Right. All right, awesome, thank you.
Okay.
How many students do you think, Steve, have they suggested yet, or not really? They
They
don't
have
know?
not. They have not, so I would hesitate to venture a guess.
Okay.
Mrs. Jarvis?
How many openings do we have?
Mr. Anderson left it at, there are still a few seats in specific classes. At the count last week, when I talked to him, we were at about 102, trending towards 103 out-of-district students at the Career Center next year. So,
It's pretty big.
Okay, so this will go on the agenda for the June
Consent
22nd meeting?
Consent agenda? We have, the previous ones have as well, that's why I asked.
We could do consent.
Yeah. Consent?
Consent's fine.
Consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is Everyday Math Student Journals, and we will hear from Mrs. Ellis again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lauren. Good evening again, everyone. Tonight I am bringing to you a request to purchase everyday math journals that are used in our elementary math program from first grade through fifth grade and sixth grade at Webster. You may remember when we adopted everyday math back in 2007. The board made the commitment to annually purchase the student consumable journals that make up the everyday math program. So this is a yearly expense that we bring to the Board of Education. We are obligated to purchase the student journals because they are consumable books, and they are what comprise the everyday math program. So the recommendation that we are making tonight is to purchase student journals for the 2015-16 school year at the total amount of $95,671.59. And when you're looking at the list of student journals, you may be wondering, why aren't we purchasing any kindergarten journals? Because we do use the everyday math program at the kindergarten level. The kindergarten teachers looked at the everyday math journals and they really didn't care much for them. So we brought together a team of kindergarten teachers. They created their own kindergarten consumable journal, and our printing department prints those for us. And the teachers are much happier using the journal that they created. So the journals that we're bringing to you are for first through fifth grade, and then at sixth grade, because we use the everyday math program at the sixth grade level at Webster. This is an annual expense, and it usually comes under the consent agenda every year, so I ask that you consider that for next Monday.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, consent agenda for the June 22nd meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last item on our agenda is other cooperative agreements for the LPT program. Ms. Soterio, good evening.
Good evening. I am here to present 3 cooperative agreements for Redford Union, South Redford, and Crestwood school districts to join our Livonia Transition Program. Our Livonia Transition Program is our local 18 to 26-year-old special education program. For next year, will be housed at Schoolcraft College. Districts are responsible for their own transportation, and we send them a bill for $14,000 for each student that buys into our program. I would recommend that we continue to provide this program for those 3 districts as we have for the past 3 years.
Questions or comments? Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Laura. How's that working out, Jen?
It's great.
Since
The best program.
Okay.
We're providing vocational training opportunities for our special education students 18 to 26 who have received a certificate of completion. We have 8 students on the job site at Schoolcraft College, where they are actually going to hire one of our students for summer work. We have students who are at Cintas Clothing, and we have one student who will be hired there. We have approximately 40 to 50 students in the entire program, and they're all over the district in many of our local schools as well, providing service in our schools.
Great, that's wonderful.
Good to hear.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Centers?
I've heard fantastic things about the program. My question is, does it cost us, from our general fund, more than the $14,000 that we charge other schools? Price per student?
They pay their proportionate share into our program.
Okay,
No, we tried to
No.
make that pretty much cost neutral, so.
perfect.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. How many students are we talking about coming from Redford Union, South Redford, and Crestwood?
That's a great question. We have 3 coming from Redford Union, 2 from South Redford, and 1 from Crestwood. That's 1 additional student into the program for next year.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. President Burton?
And there were several board members who were not even around when this began. I know Mr. Johnson and I were around when this whole thing started, but you were not even in the position that you're in now.
Correct.
But for those in the public who may not be aware, this whole thing started, if I'm not mistaken, by parents who were respectful and polite and persistent in trying to get this arranged. And it took quite a bit of work on the part of LPS administration, with Kathy Donagrande, working with Schoolcraft for quite some time to try to get this off the ground. But it's exciting to see that it's up and running and working, and it's a testament to our administration working with the needs of our parents to try to make sure these types of suggestions can come to life when they can.
Absolutely.
Actually, Jen was the author of this particular program and was
Did not know
recognized
that.
by Wayne County. Their Special Education Parent Advisory Council gave an award to her a few years back for creating this program.
That's really, I didn't even know that part of it.
Yep.
Yes, well, thank you.
You weren't at our table yet too often.
Anyone else?
Thank you for your work on it.
So this will go on the consent agenda, then the June 22nd meeting. Thank you, Mrs. Terrio.
Thank you.
And President Burton, that concludes the curriculum committee for tonight.
And that also concludes the remainder of our agenda for this evening. We are adjourned. Have a good evening.